Good evening, class. So I hope you know what discussion we are going to have here. Already 2 sessions have happened. So the basic discussion we are going to have, I'll just give you a brief overview and then with questions, I'm going to discuss what exactly the pattern is. See, 2 things important about this subject here is, or in fact, for prelims for economics, that UPSC has not given a clear syllabus for the subject. Not just for economics, but for in general for prelims, we don't know what the topics are going to be asked or what is the scope of the topics. Now, as compared to the main syllabus is quite detailed. So we know what to read, how exactly to approach the questions, because the topics are quite detailed in nature, right from paper 1 to paper 4, all the 4 subjects, all the 4 papers, and also the optional. So there's a quite detailed syllabus which has been given for the mains exam. Prelims is a tricky thing here because the syllabus is quite sketchy. So what exactly do we need to read for prelims for economics? This becomes a very big question mark. So 2 things which we have to understand. First, what exactly to read, and then how much to read. Now without the syllabus, you don't know what you're preparing for. And syllabus for prelims, if you've seen, has anyone seen the prelim syllabus? What are the topics mentioned for economics? You've seen the syllabus. And तुमने 1 साल class कर ली है. And you don't know this. And this is why this session, because even 1 year after the class, people don't know what to read and how much to read. The discussion here, 3 hours for economics here, I would not be discussing the concepts in detail. I will not be discussing the concepts and the answers. Yes, I'll tell you the answers and how to approach the question, but not in detail, because this is like 1 year of class, roughly 50 classes we take to discuss or to get to the answer. So every concept has certain detailing, which we are not going to do here. The scope would be to understand this, that what exactly we have to read and how much we have to read. First, before preparing for any exam or for anything, you need to know what you're preparing for. You have to know what exactly the content you have to read, and then how much, that is what exactly is the scope of this content. Then only you can prepare. Otherwise the field is quite open, you don't know what is going to come, you're always going to be lost in sources. This exam is not a source-based exam. You will not have a book, you will not have one source which you're going to read and you're going to qualify. Most of the questions which come here are based on your understanding and also how well you can analyze anything. These are the 2 major perspectives which are checked in prelims. UPSC Civil Services exam is not a rote learning exam which is based on certain source. Even when the things are based on facts, you would require understanding and analysis, because for knowing those facts, you'll have to read too many sources, which for a short period of time will not be possible. So with what content we have and the understanding of the thing, we try to solve questions. This is why when we see direct questions in the paper, roughly 20 to 25, maximum 30 questions are direct. Next 30 to 40 questions, you have to solve based on what you understand. So before we reach here, we have to draw the boundary of the subject. What exactly do we have to read? And then understanding each and every question. Analyzing the previous year questions, the 5 to 10 years questions, we have to know the scope of the question, how much to read. Because what to read just broadly tells you the topics. Each and every topic quite go in too much detail. But we don't have to go into too much detail. This is what we'll understand from the previous year questions. So major things to understand here is this and this. Now broadly, when we try to understand the content, what to read, from the past 10 to 15 year questions, the topics have been made clear and UPSC is not diverting from these topics. This is something, if you change the topics, again the exam itself changes. So topics what they are asking have been consistent in the 10-15 years. What type of questions are asked from these topics are slightly evolving. Because every year if you have to set new questions, you will have to evolve the level of questions, even if you are asking from the same topic. Or you are going to repeat it. Just like we've seen in other exams, questions keep on getting repeated. Here you will have very less repetition, and for forming new questions, you will have to have different type of questions from those topics. We don't change the topic because the moment topic changes, you don't know what you're preparing for. If the topics itself, the content, this changes, then you can't prepare for it. Because if you are content itself, you don't know what exactly is going to come, you don't know what to prepare for. So this is not going to happen here. The topic is quite sure what exactly are being asked. What type of questions are asked, this is slightly evolving, which we'll discuss when we take up each and every question. Now from the topics front, there are two broad things which are asked here. One is the topic specifically catering to one section of economics, that is your macroeconomics. The subject has two segments, macro and micro. Macro tries to analyze the behavior of the complete economy. The economy, the aggregates. It doesn't analyze the behavior of single entities, single individuals, which micro does. And most of our exam is centered around macroeconomics. Because this is an exam for general studies for a generalist post, the understanding should also be broad in terms of you should know the basics about the economy. We are not going to go into the details about each and every individual or theories about that. We are going to ask things on very broad aggregates. A very general understanding of economics, but on broad aggregates, not on microeconomics, only macroeconomics. Yes, microeconomics also can be asked, but one question, two questions, hardly in 3-4 years. That is why most of our preparation will be focused here. Microeconomics, yes, sometimes there is a question, but one in 3-4 years. So major chunk of the portion is here. Now when we saying broad aggregates, what are those broad aggregates of the economy? What exactly are we trying to understand? The first major topic in macroeconomics is the concept of growth and development. That how exactly, what are the parameters or how exactly does an economy work? What exactly is output of an economy? Then what exactly is growth and development of any economy? We start with the basics of, this will have the topic of the gross domestic product. We are talking about aggregates, we are not talking about a single individual, single firm. We are not talking about that behavior. We are talking about the behavior on aggregates. So the whole economy, how does it work? What is the output it produces? And then how do we measure the output of that country, that is growth? Then what exactly do you mean by growth and what do you mean by development? This is your GDP and related concepts. See, all of these topics are coming from a broader 10-year perspective. What type of questions is when we'll take one and each and every question, you will understand the scope of the topics. This is, I'm giving a broad overview, what topics are being asked. The second major topic here is the role of money in the economy. What is money? The policy related to money, that is monetary policy, or even the concepts of prices and inflation. Again, when we talk about prices, we are not talking about a single behavior of a consumer or a producer. We are talking about prices in the whole economy, which is referred to as inflation. Different forms of money. For example, we started with barter economy, then we have commodity money, we have gold. Now we have another thing which is being categorized as money, that is digital currency. Cryptocurrencies in the market, cryptocurrency by central bank. So how exactly that is happening, various dimensions of this. This year there was a question on central bank digital currency. So aggregates of output, aggregates on money, how does it perform broadly? This is the topic. Then you have another topic from where most of the questions are asked, the open economy concepts. How does one economy interact with other economies? This is where we discuss the balance of payment accounts. Balance of payment accounts is the interaction of an economy with the rest of the economy in terms of the trade, in terms of investments, in terms of loans it takes, in terms of transfer payments it has. So different concepts with respect to this is interaction of the economy with other economies. Anywhere you don't understand any terms, feel free to ask, because this is, if you don't understand the boundary concepts itself, वो आगे जाके मुश्किल होता जाएगा. Then also we discussed the exchange rate dynamics and also certain dynamics related to external trade. So external sector, the interaction of the Indian economy with the rest of the economy, Measuring all the things, balance of payment accounts, exchange rate, how exactly different exchange rates are set, what is the impact, different things, dynamics of exchange rate, and also trade, what different commodities India trades, different global commodities which are in trade, for example, who's the largest producer or largest exporter of rice. For example, this year there was a question on gold. Switzerland is one of the largest exporter of gold. So trade does not have just Indian dimensions, it also has global dimension. See, all of these in detail we are going to discuss. Scope of these questions we are going to discuss in detail. And the last part of macroeconomics is your government, the fiscal policy. And the dimensions of this topic, broadly talking about the taxation policies, expenditure policies, classification of expenditure, and also borrowing of the government and the deficits the government has. So broadly, to understand how the economy works, we need to know the output measurement, we need to know the role of money and related concepts, the role of other economies, and also the role of the government. So macroeconomics will deal with these four dimensions. And if you see the NCERT on macroeconomics class 12th, that NCERT, each and every chapter will be based on one thing. One chapter is on GDP, another chapter is on money, another chapter on fiscal policy, and one is on external sector. Most of the questions you will see will turn up from this front. This is where is your conceptual part, where you don't have a lot of facts. The concept-based understanding, where there are very less facts to remember. What type of questions? Broadly, if we see the type of questions from these fronts, there are two types of questions which are asked here. One is the basic terms. For example, what is fiscal deficit? What exactly do you understand by, say, balance of payment, foreign direct investment? Which of the following are components of foreign direct investment? Who exactly is borrowing more in the Indian economy from outside? So basic terms of various concepts, what do you understand by growth? 2018, there were roughly 3 to 4 questions only centered around what is growth, what is development, what is human capital. So basic knowledge about the terms, we don't go into too much details. See, all of these things, macroeconomics, there are models which give certain conclusions. Whenever we study some subject, any subject tries to build a theory and tries to prove it through a model. There would be certain maths involved here because we are trying to do numbers. Now this is something which we don't have to do for the exam. Absolutely no technicality is involved where different models or different theories will be discussed on any of these concepts. There are different economic thoughts which try to have their own theories of growth, own theories of money and fiscal policy. That is not being discussed or asked in this exam. The conclusion of these models, which are well accepted, is something which we go through. Only the conclusion of well accepted models, this is what we'll go through. This is why the guiding light for this part is your NCERT. NCERT class 12th on macroeconomics tells us what domain will be covered here. We don't discuss any theory, any models, absolutely no technicality involved. Only the conclusions of some models which are widely accepted, which the NCERT gives you all those models, all those conclusions. So our exam is just asking what the terms are. Our exam is asking how does something happen or what exactly is the impact if that happens. For example, if RBI prints more money, what will happen? How will, yes, all of these concepts. So if there is more inflow of dollars in the Indian economy, what will happen? If inflow happens, then what will be the impact and also what will be the remedial step? That means, what is the government going to do? What is the RBI or any other body is going to do? So the question from macroeconomics, not here, but just knowing what the terms are, understanding relation between various terms, understanding how the economy works, how these all things operate, and what step has to be taken if something happens. For example, if inflation is happening, what exactly will the government do? If inflation is happening, what will the RBI do? 1, 2, 3, 4 statements. So two major things where the question is going to be centered around the terms and cause and effect. So first domain, roughly half of the paper, 40 to 50% of the paper, is going to be about the basic macroeconomics. Not micro, macroeconomics, the broader aggregates. This is what makes economics easy to score in prelims, because once you understand these concepts, you don't have to learn anything. Understanding, you know how exactly if RBI prints more money, what is the impact on inflation, this is not going to change. This is not going to change. So if you understand, you don't have to revise this multiple times. You know exactly what is going to happen. So roughly 7 to 8 questions in prelims centered around this. Once you understand, you can solve the questions. So it's not a lot of facts which are asked. Yes, there is fact-based economics also, but not on this part. It's almost conceptual. इसमें थोड़ा सा change हो रहा है कि statement कैसे frame हो रहा है and options how they are framing. Because you understand from the examiner's perspective, there's a limit how many different variations can be created. And if I have to ask more questions, I will have to make difficult statements or I will have to make difficult options. क्योंकि topic same रखना है. Topic change होते then nobody is going to prepare because you don't know what the question is going to be asked on what topic. We'll discuss each and every example how it is happening and how exactly we have to deal with that. Is this clear? What to read? The second part of this exam is centered around the specific sectors of the Indian economy. So one is in general the broader macroeconomy, talking about terms, talking about the various relation between the terms, the cause-effect type questions. The second is the Indian economy's various sectors and various dimensions related to them. Now there are 3-4 sectors which are important here from which the questions are repeatedly coming. First, you have questions from agriculture, you have questions from various sectors of economy. Industry mein you can have a question on, say, energy generation. This year there was a question that India, despite having uranium, produces electricity from coal. Second statement that how much of uranium has to be enriched to get the energy. Now this is one sector in industry, that is your power sector. 2 years back there was a question on various dimensions of coal. For example, coal in India was nationalized when? So various sectors, again related to power itself, various sector based questions can come in industry, agriculture and also certain services. Now this sector is very important because banking and financial markets, that is your debt and your stock markets, this is where most of the questions are asked. Two specific sectors of services, that is the banking in India and financial markets. Most of the questions would be centered here. So sectors of Indian economy, in fact, all of those things which we have discussed in macroeconomics, इसका Indian perspective यहाँ पूछा जा रहा है. So for example, if we discuss the fiscal policy, what is the taxation in India will be asked. All of this, its Indian aspect is asked in prelims. So once you understand the basics here and you understand the relationship, how exactly all of these things work in the Indian context will be asked. So first thing is the macroeconomics part, the basic terminologies and how it operates. The second thing is the Indian context of this. For example, money, monetary policy in India, who operates monetary policy? What exactly is the objective of monetary policy? What are tools of monetary policy? Everything in the Indian context. Basics plus the Indian context of all these topics and specific sectoral performance of various sectors in the Indian economy. Now what type of questions are asked here? In these 3 segments, the question would be, first you need to understand what the sector is. For example, agriculture has a policy of MSP. For example, in industry, the government has introduced a policy of production linked incentive. You need to understand the basic overview of the sector, what exactly is happening in Indian agriculture, in industry and in services, specifically banking and financial markets. The second thing is the performance of these sectors Once you know what is MSP, you need to know also how exactly MSP is operating. How the questions are evolving are also happening here. First, the question was on just MSP. Now the question would move to next step, that how exactly MSP is impacting a lot of things. What is the present situation? How have we reached? See, performance of these sectors will be dependent on two things. After 1947, what exactly the structure has been and what exactly is the present scenario. There are a lot of questions which talk about the previous performances. For example, in banking, there was a scheme in 1969 called the lead bank scheme. The question on lead bank scheme came in 2018. So you have to know the working of the Indian economy right since inception. Then only you understand why the present performance is like this. And whatever the performance, there are certain solutions which the government is implementing. For example, if there is a problem of small farmers in agriculture, to tackle the problem of small farmers, the government would implement certain schemes. There would be certain approaches. For example, this year there was a question on small farmer, large field. This is related to one of the problems in agriculture. Vietnam had followed a policy of large field. The government was trying to do the same here in Odisha. They just asked what is the meaning of small farmer, large field. So if you understand the performance presently of Indian agriculture, you need to know the solution. And solution is nothing but government schemes. So broadly what we are going to cover for prelims, what to read, is your understanding how the economy operates, growth and development related concepts, money concepts, open economy concepts and government function. And how exactly the Indian economy is doing in different sectors. Roughly 15 to 16 questions come from economics every year. And those questions you don't have to put in a lot of effort finding content from different sources. Once you understand this, once you know how the Indian economy is and how it operates, you will not face difficulties. Very less amount of facts. Facts bhi kahan honge, jahan schemes hongi, and thoda bahut on performance you had to know how the policies have evolved. Because policy centered questions are also asked here. Is this clear? The broadly what you are going to read? What type of questions come from these? We are going to take each and every question. Is the broad classification clear? What the exam is about? What exactly has to be read for this exam? What type of questions we are going to discuss in detail? Is it clear? Now one by one we'll take from the macroeconomics front, then we'll come to sectors in the Indian economy. This is broadly the macroeconomics part we just discussed, what we have to cover. Now the first part is your external sector or the open economy concepts. The questions which are going to come here, again terms, what do you understand by foreign direct investment? What are components of foreign direct investment? Cause and effect, how does it operate? If more money comes in from out, what will impact on Indian economy? If money goes out, what will be the impact on Indian economy? You'll understand from the questions itself. Another important thing in the external sector is, in the whole global affairs, there are a lot of institutions which try to push certain policies with respect to how trade should happen, how growth should happen, or say how money should be managed. For example, in all of these macroeconomic concepts we just discussed, growth, money, or even your fiscal policy, there are certain institutions which are global institutions which try to push certain policies or have certain reports on all of this. For example, you have World Bank. World Bank is trying to help you have growth and development. IMF is helping on monetary stability. And for managing trade, you have concepts macro hi rahenge. Concepts micro nahi jayenge, but bodies, their reports, indices can be asked. Traditionally, UPSC is focused on these three bodies, but now since most of the questions are exhausted here, they are trying new things. For example, last 2 years we have questions on G20. We have certain related concepts with G7. We have EU related various pacts and all, because WTO trade come ho raha hai, to other trade policies that are emerging in the world, they are being asked. We'll see how exactly things are changing. So global institutions which are dealing with macroeconomic concepts can be asked reports, indices or basic things about those things. Again, questions you'll understand, बहुत ज़्यादा depth में नहीं जाना है. We only have to focus on the basics just know which body, what exactly they are trying to do. And then we have trade related questions. Trade related questions mostly centered around Indian trade, which of the commodities India exports, which of the commodities India import, what exactly is the trade policy, where does India have a agreement, what type of agreement, all of these things. And also certain important trade items for the world. For example, this year the question was on gold. There was a question on who is the largest exporter of rice in the world. Now all of these things, if you understand the basics, you'll see how the world is moving around you right now. For example, India has taken certain policy stance on rice export. So now in the newspaper, you are reading about the whole dynamics of rice, who is the largest producer, what will the impact be, is India the exporter or not. So once these things are clear to you, the static is clear to you, you should understand what is happening right now. This should make a lot of sense. And this is important for the exam also, because once the static is cleared, this becomes a very important source of information. This is why economics question get tricky, because it's not just the static terms, but how exactly it's happening right now. This is also asked. So all of these things which we have discussed have a static dimension and have a dynamic dimension. For example, Indian economy ka jo sectoral performance hai, there also you would know the present performance if you understand the past. The static is understanding what has happened. Presently what is happening, this comes from the newspaper. This is why these two are the most important source of preparation for this exam. This is going to help you understand it, the basics are clear. Then you will have a lot of related questions which is presently happening. Is it clear? Now let's see how questions based on all three things are asked. Now this is a question in 2018-19. In context of India, which of the following factors are contributing to risk of currency crisis? One of the things about balance of payment or external sector is we are going to also know about the exchange rate movements. How exactly what happens? Cause and effect. Risk of currency crisis we need to reduce. So that means if a country is trying to have movement on exchange rate, how do we reduce the risk of that movement? Foreign currency earnings of sector, increasing government expenditure, remittances from Indian abroad. So first thing I told you what to read, how much to read you have to read, on what factors will my currency crisis depend on, my currency movement will depend on. They're asking you three factors on which it can change. If there is more, first factor is saying foreign currency earning. If there is more dollar coming in the country, remittances also means more dollar. That means your currency is appreciating, currency crisis का risk कम है क्योंकि dollar की supply बढ़ गई है. Very basic currency crisis is related to the demand and supply of dollar. Anything that increases supply of dollar is reducing the risk. Anything that increases the demand of dollar is increasing the risk. Foreign currency and remittance means increasing supply. Increasing government expenditure means the demand is going to rise. Because government expenditure rising means the aggregate demand of the economy will rise. Aggregate demand will rise means import ka demand bhi badhega. Import ka demand rises means you will demand more dollar. This is increasing risk or reducing risk? Increasing. Answer here would be 1 and 3. You don't have to go into the details. I'm just telling you what type of questions are asked, that how does exchange rate or currency crisis happens. There's a very basic thing, demand and supply of dollar. How exactly it impacts, this is which understanding the concept is related to the question. So basic terms coming from balance of payment or exchange rates. Now, definition of terms. Exchange rate is of two types. One is exchange rate which is dependent on the market supply and demand of dollars. किसी भी product का price demand supply पे है. So if you want to know the price of $1, the demand and supply of dollar, this is called as the market exchange rate. Market में जो demand है, जो supply है, whatever will the equilibrium price will the price of the dollar. Another way of determining the price of a dollar is called as the purchasing power parity. Exchange rate can be defined in two ways: market exchange rate and purchasing power parity. Balance of payment and everything I told you, either the term definition will come or cause effect. What is purchasing power parity? Exchange rates are calculated by comparing the prices of same basket of goods and services in different countries. This is just the definition of the term. And the second statement, in terms of PVP, India is third largest, fourth largest, whatever. So you get the idea, you get the flow कि किस type के questions पूछे. So if you have to know exchange rate, you don't have to go into too much details that how is this PPP model working. You only need to know the definition, and you need to know India's performance. The term and where Indian. Remember I told you macroeconomics में Indian की सारी performance can be asked. So this is, you can ask, answer is here is 1 only, it's not the 6, it is. The answer is not important. Understanding what you will read is important. Similarly, next question, same paper. In fact, this is 2019, they asked roughly 20-21 questions from economics. Which one of the following is not the most likely measure the government or the RBI takes to stop the slide of Indian rupee? Slide of Indian rupee means, yes, value, it is appreciating or depreciating. Slide of the Indian rupee means it's moving from $1 is equal to 70 to 80. So you've understood that what exactly it is trying to ask, cause and effect, कि कैसे रोका जाए. Now see how cleverly the question has been framed. It's asking three different things. First, they're not likely to do. Second, you have to cover both government and RBI. That means both the bodies can take certain action, both the bodies have to be covered, and then you have to talk about depreciation. Curbing imports of non-essential items. Again, concept is simple. Demand and supply. ये अगर आपका 70 है, आपको 80 पे नहीं जाना है, तो आप क्या नहीं करोगे? Curbing imports means you are going to reduce the demand. If you reduce the demand, will it go here or less? So you understand how exactly the questions are being framed. Question is basically on slide of Indian rupee and what different factors can relate it. One thing you have to be careful in all of the economics question, that you have to read all the 4 statements. In the UPSC exam, most of the times we are in a hurry, we just want to get away with it. तो जहाँ आंसर लग रहा है easy compromise हो रहा है, जल्दी से मार्क करके आगे निकलो. This is not going to happen in economics. In economics, you will have to read all the 4 questions on their merit, because anything, most of the times D answer आता है. Because you get यहाँ पे ही energy सारी खत्म, mark किया, next आगे. You have to, and most of the time doesn't mean you follow this as a rule. Every question has to be seen on its own merit. ये all और only वाली चीजें नहीं चलती हैं. It's very luck based. And so this is something luck based, you can't go with the rule first. You don't know what will happen there. So all of these 4 concepts on demand and only in supply. For example, the second, encouraging Indian borrowers to issue rupee denominated bonds. What will this lead to, supply or demand? This means if they are issuing masala bonds are denominated in rupees. That means the payment has not to be made in, the payment has to be made in, that means the demand of dollar is. So this is how you can see each and every question on its merit statement and then go with the answer. Is it clear how exactly the questions are asked on balance of payment and exchange rate? Simple, the definition or cause and effect कि क्या करना पड़ेगा in bodies को to stop that. This is 2020. If another global financial crisis happens in the future, which of the following are most likely to give immunity to India? Now, important thing here is, any financial crisis happens, will have an impact in your economy because you are trading in. There's a lot of investment from other parts, you have borrowed, which will have an impact on dollar, which can have an impact on your economy. Now, you have to protect yourself from this. Not depending on short-term foreign borrowings. If I don't depend on short-term borrowings in dollars, that means I will be safe from the crisis. Opening up to more foreign banks. More foreign banks means more I have to deal with dollar. Again, this is, right, this is maintaining convertibility. Now, one of the concepts in balance of payment is, balance of payment has 2 accounts. One is called as current and the other is कैपिटल. इनके कंपोनेंट्स हैं तीन दोनों के. If we allow convertibility, it means you can convert any rupee into dollar and vice versa at market rates without permission. This is what we mean by convertibility. Convertibility means जितने भी हेड हैं करंट अकाउंट्स में क्लासिफाइड है, इस एक्टिविटी के लिए यू कैन कन्वर्ट रुपी टू डॉलर एंड बैक विदाउट परमिशन. बट इंडिया डज नॉट अलाउ कन्वर्टिबिलिटी ऑन capital account. Beyond a limit, you have to take a permission. Now, if it is saying if you allow full capital account convertibility, will it lead to more crisis or less? That means this will not be true. Just the basics, balance of payment or crisis क्यों होगा? And what step will lead to what? Cause and effect. We are not going into the details what will happen next. All of these questions are only asking about the first order effect. What do we mean by first order effect? If this is going to happen, what will be the impact here? उसके बाद second step क्या होगा? We are not going there. This is why UPSC questions become difficult. That people think the second order कि अगर ये हुआ तो RBI ये कर देगा और फिर आंसर मार्क करता है. वो तो लिखा नहीं है स्टेटमेंट में. Just the first order effect कि अगर ये होता है तो ये होगा कि नहीं होगा. That's the only thing. Rest of the factors are constant. You don't have to think what other people are doing when this happens. Is this clear how cause and effect? Yes. Masala bonds is a concept. Whenever countries borrow outside, they borrow in dollars. But masala, this rupee denominated bonds is that you are borrowing in rupees. Normal borrowing जो भी होती है, if a company is issuing a bond in India and this bond is being taken by someone outside, so he is going to, for example, you have issued a bond of, so you are going to get $100 and you have to return $100, right? इसमें a problem for the company is when I borrowed the $100, the price was 70, now it is 80. तो रिस्क मेरा है. जब बोरो किया तो 7,000 लिए थे, जब वापस देने तो this is my risk. But if I issue this not in dollar but in rupee, I want to borrow 700 rupees. That means risk इसका है. Also, when I pay him back, would I need dollars? Or if I pay him interest, would I need dollars? It is in, this is rupee denominated. You understand the concept. What will happen, you can analyze later. See, this is what I'm saying. What discussion you can understand, but you know what type of question will be asked. Relate. You know the concept and cause and effect उससे क्या होता है. Is it clear? See, these all topics have to go into detail in classes. 50 क्लास लगती हैं सारे टॉपिक्स में, तो 50 क्लास 3 घंटे में नहीं होंगे. But you understand what you have to read and how much you have to read. The whole purpose of this class, this is why I spent the time first there, that only thing you have to understand is if you open the newspaper, you should know what to read and how much to read. Because if you read, take less time, if you understand what to read and how much to read, you will have time for second newspaper also, which will give you more probability of getting the questions. But if you don't know what to read and how much to read, for someone, you just type the term in Google and then फिजिकल डेफिसिट के साथ साइड में इन्वेस्टोपीडिया ने 500 टर्म्स और दे दी. If you go down that rabbit hole, you don't know, you will be confused, you will close down everything. But if you know that the only thing I need to know is fiscal deficit and its impact on one or two things, that's the only thing I need to know. Those 500 things are not relevant for my exam. So this whole 3 hours we'll spend on what is relevant. ये relation बाद में discuss करेंगे. Question 2020 same. Gold tranche refers to. We discussed balance of payments. Balance of payment. See, term and component related how question is been asked. Balance of payment, I told you there is 2 type of accounts, current and capital account. Mein one of the heads is the foreign exchange reserves of the central bank. There are different things here. For example, FDI, investment, loans, a lot of things. One of the things is foreign exchange reserves of the country. Now, what are those foreign exchange reserves? There are 4 things. One, you can hold foreign currency assets. For example, the country can hold dollars. You can hold there is a special drawing rights of the IMF, and then last is reserve transposition, which is this. Basic terms and components you had to know. Foreign exchange reserves are held in 4 forms. One of the forms is reserve transposition, which is gold tranche. These things will be discussed in international institutions when you discuss IMF also. But when you know the basics, you know the components of this, this is one of the components. This is a credit system granted by IMF to its, which is part of your foreign exchange reserve. Again, not into too much detail, just the term what was asked. Gold tranche. You see the reference. Reference is macroeconomics, external sector के क्या-क्या चीजें होती हैं उसमें. We are not going into too much details, and this is not something कि current affairs related है. ये basic term से ही है. I'll show you current affairs related questions also here. With reference to foreign direct investment, which is considered as its major characteristic. Again, going back to balance of payment. Balance of payment has one head, under capital head only, is the level of investments coming in the country. Investments have 2 types, foreign direct and foreign portfolio. What the question is, FDI ka one of the major, that means they're just asking you the definition of FDI. That FDI, if comes in the country, it's an investment through capital instruments in a listed company. It's largely non-debt creating capital flow, invest which involves debt servicing, and it is the investment made by foreign institutional investors. This is portfolio. And out of the 3, you have to pick out the right statement for FDI. What is FDI here? Is it an investment through capital instruments essentially in a listed company? It can also be in an unlisted company. So this is not correct. It is largely non-debt creating capital flow. Non-debt means you don't have to pay back. Investment is non-debt. It's the investment which involves debt servicing. या तो ये सही होगा, ये सही होगा. Answer is B. It's non-debt, because if you want to finance, the other head of capital is you can take loans. One of the categories of loans is external commercial borrowing, when companies borrow. तो एक investment है, एक loan है. FDI is when companies investing, that is not giving you a debt. वो जब यहाँ borrowing होती तो debt होता. Is it making sense how just the term related to the broader balance of payment has been asked? Consider the following. This is 2021. Which of the above can be included in foreign direct investment? Now you know the meaning of FDI. Which of the following can be FDI? One thing we discussed, something is giving you, it's non-debt. That means you don't have to, there's no liability. Is deposit a liability? If someone deposits money in the bank, is it a liability? So will it be a part of the investment? So you can eliminate this. Answer is 1 to 3. Foreign currency convertible bond, you can use a bond to take it. Foreign institutional investment with certain conditions, and also depository receipt. Again, these are technical, you will understand the meaning of these, but these are part of FDI. So one question is asking you the definition, and the other question is asking you how exactly can you invest. Components of FDI. The effect of devaluation of the currency. Cause and effect. The second type. It's saying that devaluation of the currency happens, that is $1 is 70 moving to, what will happen necessarily? So if devaluation happens, what is the impact of devaluation? In the previous 2 questions we discussed, we were discussing how to stop the devaluation. कि cause नहीं होना चाहिए devaluation. यहाँ पूछा है devaluation का impact क्या है? Improves the competitiveness of domestic exports in the foreign country. How? It improves the competitiveness of export. Is this asking import? Is it? No. Is it asking the competitiveness of domestic export? Is it mentioning the term import? And why do you think import is asked here, Vallabh? Necessarily export का ही पूछ रहा है, import का पूछ रहा है. Then how will you attempt this question import के साथ? It's only asking about the impact on export. Will it improve the competitiveness of export? How? The value in dollar term will reduce. That means you can sell more quantity, right? The competitiveness of export will definitely increase. Now, but does it mean the trade balance will increase? Trade balance is export and import. Will it improve the trade balance? Why? Because at the same time your imports will become costly. If you are importing $100 worth of import, your price of import is increasing. That means you have to reduce the quantity. What if you can't reduce the quantity? The whole thing, this concept and this concept is based on quantity. Here we are saying it will improve the competitiveness. It's not necessarily saying that quantity बढ़ेगा ही, but definitely competitive हो जाएगा. This is definitely going to happen. But is it going to improve the trade balance? Because import is getting costly, you might not be able to reduce the quantity. So imports महंगे हो जाएंगे. So necessarily doesn't mean it improves the trade balance. Increases the foreign value of domestic currency. Is it increasing the foreign value or decreasing the foreign value? Rupee value increase हो रही है, foreign value is decreasing. Answer is one question, 2-3 questions in the initial years were on how to stop devaluation or what will lead to devaluation. The question is what will devaluation lead to? You just need to understand how the economy works with respect to movements in exchange rate. कि वो exchange rate devalue कब होता है और होता है तो क्या होता है. Third, if it devalues or not, what will RBI do? These 3 dimensions is what will be the question centered around. All of these you'll have to analyze in the paper itself. Is it clear? How will the trade balance improve? Trade balance is import-export relation broadly. So if my exports are, consider this example. I'm getting an import worth $100. In the first case, it was 70 and in the second case it is 80. That means the imports are getting costly. That means imports ka I will have to reduce the quantity, then only trade balance will improve. Otherwise, the import ka price बढ़ गया, trade balance will worsen. Similarly, export, it is getting competitive. Will I have to increase the quantity? If it gets competitive, that means it's getting cheaper in the outside country. That means I have an expectation I can sell more. What if this expectation doesn't stand true? Sasta ho gaya, but nobody is buying. That means I am not earning dollars. महंगा हो गया, but I am not able to reduce. That becomes the trade balance will improve or not improve. It will worsen. Question is asking. The whole question is hinged around necessarily. If necessarily would not have been done, this can happen. Because if I do this, then definitely trade balance improves. But if I'm not able to do it, then trade balance will not improve. So devaluation necessarily doesn't improve the trade balance. Is it clear? Cause and effect. Devaluation se hota kya hai? This is what you have to understand. (2022) an increase in nominal exchange rate. Market based and even we discussed purchasing power parity, 2 ways how exchange rate can be determined. There's another concept of nominal exchange rates and a concept of real. What's the difference between nominal and real? We adjust it for. Similarly, you read this statement, increasing trend in domestic inflation related to inflation in other countries likely to cause an increased divergence between nominal and. दोनों में difference in inflation का है. So if inflation is relatively more in the 2 countries, will there be a divergence between the 2? You don't need to know the concept of effective exchange rate. Without that, nominal and real only if you know. Is this statement making sense? The difference between nominal and real is, it's saying increasing trend in domestic inflation relative to inflation in other countries likely to cause an increasing divergence between nominal and real. So if my country's inflation is more as compared to other country, will these 2 values have more divergence? Will the divergence increase? क्योंकि difference inflation का है and we are saying inflation ज़्यादा है. So you don't need to know the concept of effective exchange rate. You only need to know the concept of, just know the meaning of the term. A substantial part of the question is done. Now see how these two, they are asking the basic things. Increase in near means appreciation. Increase in rear indicates improving in trade competitiveness. One thing before going the increase, you need to know what effective exchange rates are and how effective exchange rates are calculated in India. Market exchange rate we discussed. If the value increases 70 to 80, this means depreciation or appreciation. In NEER, how we calculate it, it's the opposite. So increase in NEER means appreciation. That means you have to first know the concept of exchange rate, effective exchange rate, and then you have to know the concept how they are calculated in India. So term based, cause effect based, and how exactly they operate in India. This you have a question. Is it clear? NEER is just like we measure exchange rate of dollar with respect to rupees. If I want to measure the value of rupee with respect to different currencies, this is called as effective exchange rate. When I'm saying 70 to 80, I'm only measuring the value of $1, rupee and dollar. But if I want to measure the rupee competitiveness with 5-6 currencies, that becomes an effective exchange rate. And how we calculate it, if its value is increasing, it is appreciation. Is it clear? Term and how it operates in India. Now see if this statement and how they both are related. Appreciation of rupee will improve trade competitiveness or reduce trade competitiveness? Reduce. So if there is an increase in real exchange rate, indicates an improvement in trade competitiveness. अगर increase near है, increase rear है, दोनों ही appreciation है. So does it, both the statements are they related? तो ये सही होगा या ये सही होगा? Appreciation means improved trade competitiveness or poor trade competitiveness? Poor. Increase in the other exchange rate indicates improvement. So these two cannot be true. तो अगर appreciation मानते हो तो ये सही नहीं हो सकता, या अगर ये नहीं मान रहे तो ये सही हो सकता है. If you think increase in value is appreciation, then this cannot be true. But if you think increase in value is depreciation, then this will be true. This will not be true. Is it clear? Once you know the concepts, you can take guesses also if you don't know exactly what is happening. So 3 is definitely correct. ये definition है. Out of the 2, 1 is correct. So either 2 and 3 is the answer or 1 and 3 is the answer. Is it clear? How if you know the concept, you can play around the question. This was a slightly difficult question because knowing के appreciation होती नहीं होती, not everybody knew the fact. This is why UPSC question. सबको ही पता चल जाएगा तो. It's a difficult thing. Now see how questions are evolving. This is 2021 itself. Which of the following reflects indirect transfers often talked about in media recently with reference to India? Now this is how newspaper, if you understand, then newspaper based questions also come here and see the reference. Has anyone heard about the Vodafone the retrospective taxation case? What happened here? Why were the government asking it to pay retrospective tax? ऐसा क्या हुआ था? Retrospective means previous deal. What was the deal? Yes, Vodafone, an outside company, wanted to buy Hutch in India. Hutch ka parent company was in some other country. So they did not directly come to India. They bought the shares of Hutch, which this company was holding here. This is a indirect transfer. That means macroeconomic developments happening in the newspaper for last 1 year, you have to cover all. This question shows the relevance of the newspaper. When you understand what exactly this deal happened, you have a basic understanding of economics, you'll understand this deal. वही term है indirect transfers, where a foreign company transfers shares and such shares derive their substantial value from assets located in. A foreign company transfers shares and such shares derive their value from an asset in. This is an. So macroeconomic developments in the external sector, when the basics are clear, the newspaper has to be comprehensively done. There is no alternative of the newspaper for economics. You have to follow. And if you have less time for the second newspaper, you can read only the economics portion. But these type of things should be known. In last 1.5 years, whatever economic developments, macroeconomic developments, you need to know. Consider the following statements. This one question, 2022 UPSC cancelled. But we just see how exactly they're asking questions. It is in line with how they ask these questions. Tight monetary policy of US could lead to capital flight. The question cancel isliye hua because they did not say capital flight from where. Whether the capital will fly from India or, this is why this cannot have a right answer. We assumed capital flight from, then we have given the answer. Tight monetary policy. So you need to know what tight monetary policy is. The term has to be known. And then what is the impact of tight monetary policy? Tight monetary policy means the interest rates are being, if US increases interest rate, what will happen to capital? Will people put more money in US or take money out of US? Why will they put more money? More interest and more return. That means it could lead, if we assume India, can it lead to capital flight from India? That means this is correct. Now if capital flight happens, what will happen to the existing external commercial borrowings? For example, if a company has borrowed $100 and if capital flight happens, will it increase the cost or decrease the cost for it? See how cause and effect. First, what happened? Outflow of dollars. That if outflow of dollars happens, this is the demand of dollars, this is the supply. What will happen to supply of dollars? If there is an outflow of funds from India, supply will reduce or increase? Supply is going to reduce. That means exchange rate 70 से 80 जाएगा. अगर exchange rate 70 से 80 जाता है, so external commercial borrowings, will their cost increase or decrease? Will they have to now pay more or less? 70 से 80, more or less? So is it increasing the interest cost? And devaluation is happening or price is rising? Of domestic currency decreases currency risk. If devaluation this happens, does it increase risk or it reduce risk? Is anything technical here in open economics? You only need to know the meaning of the term and you need to know only two variables, how they impact. And all of the questions which we have seen of the last 5 years can be solved. This is one set of questions based on terms and cause and effect relations. Is it clear? Yes. Which one? Increases the foreign value of domestic currency. What happens in devaluation? What happens in devaluation? We are moving from $1 is equal to 70 to $1 is equal to 80. Now if you see 1 rupee terms, it is 1 by 70 leading to 1 by, is it increase in value or decrease in value? Decrease. So are we decreasing the foreign value of domestic currency? Domestic currency की value पूछ रहा है in foreign terms. So it's asking you the opposite. It's asking you 1 rupee is how many dollars? 1 by 70 and 1 by, so is it increasing or decreasing? Is it clear? And if you have a problem here, first do CSAT. It's very basic. It's okay. Just in the exam, just write down all these figures. You have paper, you just write down everything. What? So when it is saying devaluation, it is moving from, but I'm talking about $1. Is it clear? Fractions and all, ये मुश्किल हो सकता है. People don't know. It's okay to know. If you know what your issue is, it's okay, you can solve it. But if you don't accept it, you will not be able to solve it. You'll face the problem in the exam. And these type of silly mistakes is going to get you out of the race. Because these questions should be correct. These are not difficult questions. And if you lose out on these questions just because you are overconfident, this is going to be a problem. Now second is international institutions based. What type of questions are asked? See again, international institutions, mostly questions would be centered around these three only. IMF, World Bank and WTO. This is where they're mostly asking questions. Now also, G20. Now, what is happening, because the themes here are being exhausted, now international questions are being asked on themes. Theme-based institutions are being asked. For example, if there is, after pandemic, there is too much debt across the global economies, is there any solution by any of the international institutions on debt? If there is something on climate change, if there is something happening in trade, themes based, then those institutions are asked. For example, trade mein there is one thing happening, that a lot of technology is improving. Technology is improving, you have upcoming of artificial intelligence. Also because of technology, you have other changes, that how exactly are you going to protect data. Now all of these plus other things also on what are recently happening, you need rules here. Global trade mein, WTO right now is not functioning. That means there would be some efforts on defining this rule. What exactly is that institutional mechanism? So whenever you read those macroeconomic themes, whatever the themes be, is there any institutional mechanism apart from these? They can be asked, and this is what is happening in the last 2 to 3 years. I'll show you questions how those themes have been picked up. And then those institutions have been asked. Everything is covered in the newspaper. But mostly we have been following these three, we skip rest of the mechanisms. G20 common framework. This year, the sustainability, trade and technology pact between US and European Union. This is setting the rules for this, because WTO is not working, and there's a 3-statement question on that. So theme-based international institution, if someone is doing, they are being asked. I'll show you examples. Now previously, before 2019, questions were mostly centered around reports. Global Competitiveness Report is published by whom? So various reports and indices on tracking the performance of economies used to be asked. So Global Competitiveness Reports was one of the publication of World Economic Forum. Similarly, international institutions formed that time in news that time with reference to Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Very basic statements, more than 80 member nations. India is the largest shareholder. India, it does not have members outside Asia. So institutions mentioned in the news having connection to India. This is something they used to traditionally cover from 2013 to 2018-19. Now there are more questions based on themes. I'll show you how it's happening. Now these type of questions are less, but we still can't rule them out. You have to read the reports and whatever institution is publishing, and new institutions have formed. Is it clear? Here India is not the largest member. You can get the answer here itself. It was China. So with that you can eliminate. And now elimination is also eliminated. So whatever options you do, you have to know everything. Thodi mehnat badh gayi hai. Which of the following is not a sub-index of World Bank Ease of Doing Business? Ease of Doing Business is a very famous report. 2014, when the government came into power, they started targeting the indices here. They allotted each and every index to each and every ministry so that India can seek an improvement. And within a very short span of time, India improved from 144 to 66, 65. Because India had allotted each and every indicator to different ministries. This is why it was often mentioned in the news, because Indian government was specifically targeting this report. UPSC asked a question in 2019, which of the following is not a sub-index? Now sub-index, this was a new thing happening here, because earlier it was only asking report hai kiski. They've already asked this in 2015, World Bank Ease of Doing Business is a report of which of the following. Now various reports which are important, for example, often mentioned in news, for example, Global Hunger Index, Multi-Dimensional Poverty Index, which are often coming in news and have relevance, unke sub-indices bhi prepare karna hai. You should know Multi-Dimensional Poverty Index has what all sub-indices. You should know Global Hunger Index has what all sub-indices and where exactly India is lacking. So those things have to be prepared of reports which are often in news. This was a report targeted by the government. This is why this became very important. And within very short span of time, India improved its ranking roughly half. Is it clear? Next year, they cancelled the report. Seeing India's performance, getting jealous, cancelled the report. Here are new terms. Law on data protection, theme-based, such as General Data Protection, GDPR regulations. Started implementation 2000 by what? International institutions, any economic development in terms of macroeconomics, rules on data protection, done by European Union. Had a very big implication for Indian companies also. Traditional question, WTO. Now from previous years, one thing was clear that WTO related questions, not just what is WTO, when it was formed, basics, but also WTO ka whatever agreements have taken place. There were 3 major agreements that have taken place. General agreement on tariffs and trade, general agreement on trade and services, and TRIPS. GATT में एक agreement है, agreement on agriculture, and there's another agreement called agreement on investment. So UPSC started evolving the questions. They started with very basic thing on WTO and asked basic things about this. That what is blue box related to which body? What is peace clause related to which body? So these agreements was already UPSC giving a signal that WTO agreements are important. Now this was a very difficult question on one of the policies, that was TRIMS. They asked specific features of TRIMS. Quantitative restrictions on imports are prohibited. They apply to investment measures to trade in both goods and services. GATT was part of, or TRIMS was part of GATT, not GATS. So this was not correct. They are not concerned with regulation of foreign investment. WTO does not have any policy on foreign investment. They were not concerned with it. This is correct. 1 and 3 were the answer. One thing understood from here, that WTO agreements have to be prepared in detail. 2017 they had asked a similar difficult question from WTO on trade facilitation agreement, which is part of one of the agreements of WTO. So WTO, not just the basics, its agreements, its implication on trade also are asked in quite detail. So everything has to be prepared in detail. Is it clear? World Bank, IMF, World and WTO. These 3 have been covered in detail in UPSC. With reference to water credit, consider the following statement. This was 2021. Now sometimes offbeat questions, yes, it was important for water related issues, but this is very difficult to track such a question. And how exactly you have to prepare for it. Because this was not under WHO or the important bodies, water.org and certain obscure institutions that started this. Yes, it was about microfinance tools and enable poor people to meet their water demands. But such type of questions, it's difficult to read about. So you should not derail your preparation that these are the topics we are going to prepare. एक offbeat के चक्कर में नई bodies नहीं पढ़नी है. 4 traditional bodies, World Bank, IMF, WTO and G20, and rest theme-based preparation. This would be very difficult to catch. So don't look for new bodies and what can come, because you'll be lost, you don't know whether it is important for the exam or not. Cover the traditional parts. One-off question is something. Out of 15, 16, if you leave question 1, it's not a problem. But doesn't mean that this question is going to determine how you prepare. These questions can be skipped because it's difficult to capture them. They do not fall in line with what they ask usually. But this is definitely in line. This is 2022. Rapid financing instrument and rapid credit facility are related to provisions of what? Why was this question important? Why would you read about these things? Sri Lanka had a crisis. IMF reportedly had too much discussions. These instruments were discussed. Similarly, IMF having with Pakistan, having with Bangladesh, any IMF related development, you have to know the names. Is it clear? These 4 traditional bodies you have to cover in detail. With reference to G20 common framework. Now why this is a theme-based question. This has happened in the last 2 years. One of the things that happened after the pandemic was a lot of countries have started taking too much debt and they are not in a position to repay this debt. And this is not just happening with the poor countries, it's happening in the developed world also. For example, European Union, they have a problem on the fiscal front because a lot of countries are having too much debt. So they are having their own solution. For other countries, especially low-income countries, this was the solution. So macroeconomics theme, that was fiscal policy debt. Any development that happened globally, the solution was G20 common framework. So one thing to be prepared is your traditional bodies. But apart from this, if any new emerging theme, for example, climate change, there have been discussions, or any other technology related discussions which have an impact on global trade or have an impact on the global economy, those themes have to be prepared. Ab ye theme tha unsustainable debt. Macroeconomic theme था और ये solution था. Hindu Express, everyone covered this. So not only the focus has to be here, the focus has to be on the emerging themes and how the world is dealing with it. The answer here was both, mentioned in the first few lines of the Hindu article itself. See, this is how difficult themes-based things are becoming. This is 2023. On how many of the above does UNOPS, Sustainable Investment in Infrastructure Innovation Initiative, focus for investments? This is a water credit type question. Water credit, you can't capture the theme, you can't capture the body. The same thing, you can't capture this. Very difficult to know, very sparsely covered in news. So this one question is something you can skip. It doesn't fall in line. You can't prepare for these questions. Because even if you take a guess, sustainable development infrastructure में बात करें, चारों सही है. If you just see the concept, if you don't know the fact, you'll not be able to take a guess here. The answer is 1, 3, and 4. Mass rapid transport is not covered. So you don't know body is deciding on what factors. So it's not advisable to take a guess here because this is a fact-related question. And theme is very difficult to capture. So we go with the traditional path, 4 bodies plus other themes which can be captured, which are mentioned in news. For example, G20 Common Framework was too much in news. This was not extensively covered in news. This is the question, same 2023. Now see how this could have been done. Stability and Growth Pact of European Union is a treaty that. Stability and Growth Pact, because the problem of debt is becoming unsustainable in European Union also. For that, they have signed to manage the debt of various countries of how much they can take deficit or debt. This is the problem we were discussing, debt. Usse related, there is an international mechanism. Limit the levels of deficit of countries of European Union. This is why this was done. Rest makes the countries share infrastructure, share technologies, nothing. So new emerging themes like this, because after pandemic this has happened, or technology, or even trade. These have to be prepared. Theme-based international development, which has a global or even this large impact. Is it clear how institutions have to be covered? We are moving from traditional coverage of institutions where they used to ask reports or where they used to ask the agreements or initiatives of WTO, IMF, or even the World Bank. Remotes mein they used to cover the World Economic Forum also. Now this pattern is being dropped in the last 2 years. Very less questions are coming on this front. More questions would be on theme-based international rule making. So any important themes, for example, US has also done, US, European Union have made a pact based on trade. So any important theme based international institutions you will have to cover. This is the changing pattern. So you can't expect questions on report and indices again. Yes, this is a probability, but you have to evolve here also. So newspaper reading has to be more precise. And why more precise? Because elimination ki bhi ab options nahi milenge. So your strategy has to change accordingly from here to here. You have to cover. Doesn't mean that this is not going to happen. A very simple thing that if WTO agreement, they have covered GATT in detail, where they've covered agreement on agriculture, they've covered TRIMS, and they've also covered trade facilitation agreement all in detail. That means these questions are now eliminated. Either you're going to have a repetition or you're going to have in-depth theme from the WTO itself. Because theme yahi rahegi, ya in-depth yahan hoga, or you're going to have such type of questions. So this is what you have to evolve your preparation accordingly. You can't complain after the exam कि UPSC कुछ भी पूछ रहा है. This is not going to solve anything. Complain whatever or how much time you want. This is an indication to evolve according to the exam and not complain later, because there would be 10,000 students who would be doing this. So it's better to change your strategy accordingly and not just focus on that. This is why newspaper reading is the most important thing now in the exam. You can't do with compilations because ऐसी 500 चीजें लिखी होंगी और वो सब एक बार में याद नहीं होंगी. Because you can learn things only when there is a context to it. ऐसे context बनता है. If I give you 10 or even 20 themes like this, it's very difficult because you'll confused कि क्यों हो रहा है ये. If you read it daily with the context, you're able to solve this question. Is it clear? There were 2-3 questions like this. There's not just one. The previous question was also like this only. The theme was slightly offbeat, but it was based on theme only. This is also based on theme. There's another question I'll show you. US on US European Union Trade and Technology Compact. That was also on a theme. 2023, 3 questions based on theme, international institutions. Is it clear how international institutions have to be prepared? What is the scope? Trade dynamics, what we need to cover here, the third part. You see the world around you. For example, climate change is a theme. Disaster management is a theme. Do we have a concept of CDRI, where we're talking about disaster management, coalition for disaster resilient infrastructure? This is a new body. Who's making this body? Is this disaster management an important theme right now? Climate change, climate finance. Could this be a theme? Debt, too much debt in too many countries. Unsustainable levels, there's G20 common framework. So things evolving right now. For example, rule making on artificial intelligence, GDPR, data protection. These themes are right now evolving in front of you. And those institutions internationally which we are doing. Now take this example along with it. No. For prelims. Mains mein you don't have. Mains mein definitely last part of the GS2 is international institutions. And last year what they asked in mains was India's stand on climate change in different forums. So this was the theme based international institutions. Now see this question. This is the question I was talking about. Recently the US and the European Union have launched the Trade and Technology Council. The US and UA claim that through this they're trying to bring technological progress and physical productivity under their control. Now the theme here was, they're talking about trade and, so what exactly would they be talking about? Trade and technology mein kya? Question ye hai, because now trade is evolving and there are too many rules which have not been made because there have been no negotiations under the WTO. For example, how do you protect investments from outside? How do you tax them? Or even artificial intelligence, data protection, safety and security, especially with respect to trade, increasing problems with respect to law and order. All of these things, do we have any rule making by WTO? Now when you don't have anything rule making on WTO, countries are trying on their own to derive the negotiations on them bilaterally. This is what Trade and Technology Council is. They're trying to set the rules, not just amongst itself, trying to form a template for the world to follow. Earlier they were trying under G7, which was called as Osaka track. It was talking about similar thing. For example, e-commerce pe bhi policy kya hai? It's part of FDI on e-commerce. And it's not trying to increase technological progress, it was trying to make rules on this. So understand how theme-based international institutions are being covered. Now this is something very difficult because this you would not read daily. Because we are focused on World Bank, IMF, WTO. And 3 questions in 2023 were on theme-based organizations. This is a very important theme because we don't have rule making on any of this. US and EU through this opinion or through this compact are trying to make these rules. Is it clear how theme-based international institutions have to be covered now? This is why reading the newspaper extensively is important. Because you can't complain that these questions are tough. They've already given a hint that we are moving towards this directions. International institutions in the past 2 to 3 years. Is it clear? You can't stop reading the newspaper. Now more, what all traditional questions of trade have been? Among the following, which of the is the largest exporter of rice in the world in the last 5 years? Certain commodities which are important, they will always come in the news. For example, rice, wheat, sugar, millets, anything, these major traded commodities, steel, they will always appear in the news. You should have an idea who's the largest exporter, who's the largest importer, what is the situation of global trade. Specific India also. Among the agriculture commodities imported by India, which of the following is the highest imports? For trade related development specific to India, economics survey is the major source. Survey talks about all type of trade, gives all details with respect to what is the trade, what commodities we are trading in, specific to India. But global also is important. We've seen a question here. Ab ye roz news mein aa raha hai. Some things cannot be learned. Some things you understand and based on your understanding you solve in the paper. This is that. This is why newspaper again. India's international trade. This question was cancelled by UPSC because 2 mahine pehle ye statement got wrong. Normally this statement is correct. India's merchandise exports are less than imports. But before the exam for 2 months, pandemic hit and exports were more than imports. So this is why they had to cancel the question. क्योंकि ये statement सही नहीं बन रहा था यहाँ. So like we discussed for imports of India, this is talking about the complete trade perspective, the trade scenario for India. India's merchandise, goods exports are less than goods imports. India's imports of iron steel have decreased in recent years. India's exports of services are more than import of services. India suffers from an overall trade deficit. So basic performance of Indian economy on macroeconomic indicators, that is trade, you have to prepare. Economic survey is the source for all this data. This is going to tell you about all these things. Economic survey is talking about India's performance in the last 1 year. So on trade, how we performed, what articles we sent, what articles we imported, everything it is going to talk about. You need to have an idea on that. It's getting more specific. I'll show you how 2023, the question was very specific. The term West Texas Intermediate, sometimes found in the news, refers to grade of what? Have you heard of the term Brent? Sometimes with Brent, they have also mentioned WTI, West Texas Intermediate. Certain commodities important for global trade, not just agriculture, even right now they're also talking about another type of crude, Ural. Why? Russia. So these terms related global commodities you have to know. Specific to India, the value of Indo-Sri Lanka trade has consistently increased in the last decade. Now this is something very difficult to remember. But international relations, when you cover India and neighbors, you have a rough idea how India is performing. This is where you can solve this question, but very difficult to know the past 5-10 year performance. So very difficult statement, but still these type of statements are asked. Textile and textile articles constitute an important item of trade between India and Bangladesh. In last 5 years, Nepal has been the largest trading partner of India in South Asia. Now how you can solve with whatever you know about India and its neighborhood relations. India and its neighborhood relations, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, these are the 3 countries which will have maximum trade. Pakistan, because of the relations, will not have significant trade. Now out of the 3, can Nepal be the largest trading partner? Consider the size and consider what economy it has as compared to Bangladesh, Bhutan, or even Sri Lanka. So if you have a rough idea on India and its neighborhood relations, you would know this cannot happen. So if you eliminate 3, you have only 2, 1 and 2 and 2 only. Based on your understanding of international relations, because this is a very difficult statement, these 2 can still be done. India's trade with its neighbors, again economic survey, and also your international relations preparation. Because there in main syllabus you have a topic India and neighborhood relations. 2023, Switzerland is one of the leading exporters of gold in terms of value. Gold is often in news. Recently also gold was in news that central bank are trying to hoard gold. Because of the volatile movements in currency, central banks सब लोग gold hoard कर रहे हैं. So from where does the gold come? Who is the largest exporter? Does Switzerland have the second largest gold reserves? So important global commodities, metal, steel also can be asked here. Important commodities, both agriculture and other commodities, tradable commodities, you have to have a rough idea. Not just crude, gold, steel, everything. This was a similar. This is the theme-based international institution. And this is why again economic survey is important. Having a rough idea on India's exports. India accounts for 3.2% of global export of goods. Many local companies, this was an unrelated statement. India accounts for 3.2. Do we have such substantial export of goods? Is India a major exporter of goods that it can have a 3% or even 4%? It's roughly in the range 1.5 to 2%. 1.5, 1.6, sometimes 1.8. And this tabular information is given in economic survey. It has a source tabular information about India's percentage of exports in goods as a global percentage. Many local companies and some foreign companies operating in India have taken advantage of India's production-linked incentive scheme. One of the efforts to improve India's manufacturing is production-linked incentive. Now, can foreign companies take production-linked incentive? This is something you would have read in the newspaper 100 times. There are so many companies applying for production-linked incentives. So many complaining that they have not got the incentives. In fact, India, this was a major news also. One of the Hyundai companies, they applied for battery, PLI. Baad mein Hyundai automobile manufacturer clarified that we are not the same Hyundai. and Government of India then cancelled. So this became a big news. So all of this related news, production linked incentive can be given to foreign and both. So trade related, India's profile of trade, major source point would be economic survey. And rest important global commodities trade has to be covered from the newspaper. Because you've seen multiple questions coming on this front. Last year itself, Switzerland gold, yes. Which one? Have taken, yes, it's correct. Many foreign companies, in fact, last month, this week itself, Japan and South Korean firms are complaining they're not getting their PLI funds, which they should be. They have taken, yes, this is correct. And why they are two related? Because if you're giving it to foreign, they can also export. Complaint, so that means someone can take, right? If there's a complaint, that means someone can take foreign. So does it mean the statement is correct? Now, you don't need to know the features of PLI in detail. You just have to read the newspapers, you will know that this is done or not. This is why I said 20 to 25 questions in prelims can be directly attempted, where you know the source. Next 40 questions have to be based on what you have learned in 1 year. Major learning source is newspaper. Is it clear how external sector is to be covered? What type of questions are asked? Both in terms of basics, the terminology, cause and effect, and international institutions and trade. Is it clear how this part of the exam has to be prepared for? What all different topics and how questions are evolving? Any doubts here? This is how to figure out, right? Trade वाला तो पता चल गया, balance of payment भी पता चल गया, इंडिया का कहाँ पे क्या है. So how would you know beforehand? That means you prepare everything. Definitely. And 400 is quite less. You will have to read a lot. What position you want to get selected to? Like what? We are not just asking what your name and yellow cadre. There's no shortcut here. You're seeing the difficulty of this exam. Mains, prelims, the difficulties in terms of themes they are asking from certain topics. You have to adjust your strategy accordingly. You can't say that I need to read only 100 pages and I want this selection. That is not going to happen. Because if you have to frame new questions, the questions will evolve like this. And your preparation strategy has to evolve. And if you're not doing someone else's, any day they're going to beat you there. Mains and prelims, this is how it's different. Mains, you know what the question is. But can you write it in 8 minutes or not? That's the problem. The topic is clear, the scope is clear. Can you write it in 8 minutes? That's the problem. Here it's, can you pick the theme and then solve based on whatever you have learned? I can't give you one source and tell you, okay, read 100 pages and the question is going to. The moment this is going to happen, the cutoff will be 180. And that's like difficult to prepare for. 117 was the cutoff in 2016. Why? Because most of the questions were very direct from current affairs. PT 365 में से आए थे 50 question. Just go back and check. Both of things are available on the net, 50 questions. And everybody knew cutoff was 117. This year, you did not know the new questions that were going to be asked. Cutoff 85, 86. Last year also 85, 86. This year, though, in fact, could have gone 80, 85 somewhere. That means you need to evolve. You can't expect do less things and get the maximum. Not going to happen. And in fact, it should not happen. If that happens, that's a very difficult race. Because फिर वही जिनको रट्टा मारना आता है वो गए. Rank 1. Now next topic is money and monetary policy. Now money and monetary policy also follows the same pattern. What type of questions? You have the basic terms. What is money? What are banks? What do banks do? How is money created? Money multiplier, money supply, money demand. The basics how money operates in Indian economy. Monetary policy again, how we control the supply and demand. What are the functions? What are the objectives? What are the tools? What does the RBI do? What does the government do? And third, related to money is the concept of prices. So just like we talked about external relations, how economy functions with rest economies, this is how its own economy tackles its money. Different concepts related to money, how money operates, monetary policy, and also inflation. Now what type of questions on this front? Which of the following is not included in the assets of a commercial bank? Basic function of banking. Any institution, bank or any company, will have an asset and will have a liability. What is the difference between the two? Everyone was quick to answer asset and liability. होता क्या है? Huh? This is to be owned. Asset is something which generates income for you. This is an asset which generates income for you, and liability is something which you owe. You don't have it, you something owe to someone. Now, which of the following is not included in assets of a bank? See how basic the questions are. They're not asking too much details about money. They're only asking about bank ka asset liability. Loans or advances. Is loan an asset or a liability? Why? Because it's a interest payment. Deposit. You don't have to go. You found the answer. If the bank is investing, earns money. Money at call and short notice is money given to someone which earns interest. Interbanking operations में call and short notice एक instrument होता है. That is this. But anyhow, you get the answer on deposit. Deposit is a liability. You have to pay interest on it. You don't owe it. You don't own it. Is it clear? Very basic question on banking. A very favorite topic which used to come a lot. Money multiplier in the economy. Now, what is money multiplier? See, again related to very basic things about bank. Bank, whenever is getting a deposit from someone, say bank gets a deposit of 100, if all of the people who are depositing money in the bank, they come to the bank to take their money, will the bank have that money? Why? Because there's a system on which banks operate, it is called as fractional reserve system. That means if bank is getting deposits worth rupees 100, there is certain reserve which you can keep. For example, RBI says 10%. So 10 आपको रखना पड़ेगा. 90 is something which you can give as loan. That means in an economy, at the same time, you have 100 also, have 90 also. आपने 100 को 190 में कन्वर्ट कर दिया. पर्सन जिसने डिपॉजिट किया वो 100 भी मांग सकता है बैंक से, and 90 लोन आगे दिया. That means this has been created. If this cycle continues, 90 goes in another bank, he has to keep 10% separate. 81 he can give a. That means more money is creating only on 100 rupees. This is called as money multiplier. Basic concepts how banks operate. First was bank के asset liability क्या है. Second, how can bank create money? This is the concept of basic terminology with respect to money. Now, how can I increase the money multiplier? That means how can I increase the 100 to more money that can be created? More money will be created by two things. One, if more people come to the bank, 100 की जगह ज़्यादा पैसे, I will create more. Or if this reserve is less, I can create more. Increase in ratio. Will the increase in reserve ratio increase multiplier or decrease? Increase in banking habit of the population. What will happen if banking habit will happen? Change. More deposit. This is what we were looking for. Increase in statutory liquidity ratios. This is like cash reserve. That means ratios बढ़ रहे हैं. Next is increase in population. Now, increase in population doesn't mean the population is getting to the bank, because deposits mean more money. If people save in gold, will they get this money to the bank? That means money multiplier will. So we don't know what the habit is. His habit is banking, then definitely. So how does bank operate? What were the functions of the bank? And this question was repeated also. Similar. Money, with basic things, how exactly money is controlled. What are the various dimensions of money supply and various dimensions of money demand? One thing is understanding money, understanding banking. Then there's another concept of understanding money supply and demand. Money supply कैसे change होता है, money demand how does it change? Now the question is asking, if you withdraw 1 lakh in cash from your deposit account, what will happen on the money supply? For this you need to know how money supply is measured. Money supply measurement के there are different indicators. For example, M1, M2, M3 and M4. This question is asking, if I withdraw 1000, what will be the impact on money supply if I measure through any of these? Money supply M1 means how much currency is with the people and how much is there in their banks. Demand deposit में कितना है और बैंक हाथ में कितना है. If I take it from the demand deposit and get it out, what will happen to money supply? M1. अगर 1 लाख रुपए अकाउंट से निकाला, what will be the impact on M1? M1 is a measure of money supply. Why? Because ये currency में convert, this is currency in hand, this is demand. So if I minus 10,000 here, 1 lakh here means plus 1 lakh here. That means it is basic about what controls supply and demand and how supply and demand are measured. This is how it is measured. You just need to know the indicators. The moment you know the indicators, this question is done. So basic terminology, that is money and its supply and demand. Now monetary related concepts, monetary policy. If RBI decides to adopt an expansionist monetary policy, what of the following it will not do? Monetary policy can be of two types. It can be an expansionary policy or it can be a expansionary policy means that I am going to expand the money supply. Contractionary means I am going to. तो अगर RBI को expand करनी है money supply, what all it can do? All of these are tools of monetary policy. So basics you need to know what exactly is monetary policy, expansionary and contractionary, and you need to know how the monetary policy is controlled, the tools of monetary policy. So expansionary means money supply increase. If I cut the statutory liquidity ratio, that means how much the banks have to be keeping with themselves. If this is reduced, will it increase or decrease? And the question is not do. That means this is something it will do. Increase the marginal standing facility rate. Marginal standing facility rate, another term in monetary policy, is the rate at which the RBI gives money to banks. If I increase the rate to the banks, will it increase money supply or decrease? It will decrease because money is getting costly for them. And we want to do expansionary opposite. So this would be wrong, this would be correct. Observe the world around. There is a lot of problem of NPAs in the banking system in India. This is a question asked in 2020. Now this is the time period. Till now we have NPAs and write-off and a lot of technical terms being mentioned. Now NPA problem meant that someone has taken money from the bank, a company is not able to pay. Then how do we know that this company will have the ability to pay? This is the idea of interest coverage. So what was happening here, to understand the NPA problem, the Economic Survey and a lot of newspapers covered this news that a lot of companies have taken loans from the banks. Those were known as interest coverage ratio 1, IC1 companies. That means they don't have the ability to pay. IC1 companies or interest coverage ratio means how much do I earn, what is my earning as compared to my interest payments. Now if I am an IC1 company or my interest coverage is less than 1, that means my earning is less than my interest payments. And Economic Survey and also a lot of newspapers mentioned कि बैंक ने उन लोगों को ज़्यादा लोन दिया है जो IC1 है. IC1 means their earning is less than their, that means they're not sustainable. This is explaining the problem of, so once you understand the basic functioning of banks' money, you need to observe the world, you need to know the interest coverage ratio from the newspaper because IC1 was quite famous. Now it helps in understanding the present risk of a firm that a bank is going to give a loan to. It helps in evaluating the emerging risk, not just present, but आगे risk भी क्या है, वो interest coverage से ही पता चल रहा है. The higher the borrowing firm's level of interest coverage ratio, the worse is its ability to serve the debt. So if my IC value is 5, is it worse or better? It is better because the whole problem was IC is less than 1 or poor. So it's not just the basics you have to cover, you have to relate it to what is happening. See, at the end of the day, the whole exam is about understanding the newspaper. You can understand only when you know the basics. So this is why these type of questions are also, and I'll show you a lot of questions on this related to current affairs. The money multiplier, 2021 they repeated the question. Money multiplier increases which of the following? Increase in, is it clear? The whole concept of money multiplier. होता नहीं है वैसे ऐसा, but this is 2023. Which one of the following activities of RBI is considered as part of sterilization? Again, basic concepts of money. What is happening in sterilization? What happens is, if too much of dollar inflows in the Indian economy, what will happen to exchange rate? If there is too much of supply, what will happen to exchange rate? The exchange rate is going to... Is appreciation good for exporter or bad? Bad. That means the exports will fall. किसी भी reason की वजह से dollar बहुत ज़्यादा आ रहा है, which has led to appreciation. That means the exports will fall. Now, if exports fall, this is a problem for Indian economy. So, what does the RBI do? RBI intervenes in the market. RBI starts buying dollars. This will solve this problem. Dollar ज़्यादा था तभी appreciation है. If I take out that dollar, will this stop happening? But this will lead to another problem. If RBI buys dollar, that means RBI has to sell. If I buy dollar, I'll have to give equivalent amount of rupees. If I give too much rupees and output is not increasing, will it lead to inflation? One of the cause of inflation is when money supply increases but output does not increase. How does the RBI then control this inflation? RBI buys this rupee and sells government security. तो दोनों काम हो गए, एक्सपोर्ट भी बच गए, इन्फ्लेशन भी नहीं हुआ. This whole process is called as two things happening: managing exchange rates and managing money supply. This happens when RBI conducts open market operations, means buying or selling of government security. So basic concepts about money, basic concepts of monetary policy. Sterilization is what? If you understand sterilization, this is not a difficult question. Is it clear? This is this year. So basics of money, money supply, and all of these terms are mentioned in the NCERT. How much in depth you have to go comes from the NCERT. How it is working in the Indian economy is definitely asked, but base वहीं से बनता है. This is another form of currency. Now we discussed money, what forms, different developments in money. For example, we had started with commodity money, different commodities were money, then there was metal, then there was gold, now we have paper money. Now there's new, this is technology. And you can take a break for 5-10 minutes till this gets operated. Coming back, money. This is a type, we have 100 questions and we have covered only few. So we have to move fast, thoda. What? We're talking about different forms of money. In the basics, we cover what type different, for example, paper currency, legal tender, various things. Now this is a new technological development, that is your digital currencies but issued by central bank. This form, this cryptocurrency is either through the central bank or is through private bodies. For example, bitcoins, similar cryptographic forms which represent value or no value, that is non-fungible tokens. This CBDC is being explored by a lot of countries. What features can be given to them is something which has been repeatedly covered in the news. Basics of money, this is a new development, and how exactly this can be created, what can be the different features of this currency, this is repeatedly covered in the news. 2 features asked by UPSC this year. Possible to make payments in a digital currency without using US dollar or SWIFT system. The whole idea is to create an alternative. The digital currency can be distributed with a condition programmed into it, such as a time frame for spending it. Now, why this statement you should have known? Because different features with respect to how this currency can be launched have been explored by different countries and have been reported by the newspapers. And this is one feature you can have, programmable, non-programmable, both. So this is, question is, can be. So when you're exploring different features of a currency, this can happen. Answer is, but the whole thing, how exactly to prepare for this, digital currencies is a form of money. And money, basic concepts, we are preparing for this exam. Any new technological development is to be covered with the various features. Important thing with money related concepts is your concept of inflation. The pattern of questions with respect to inflation remain the same, terminology type and cause and effect, what causes inflation, what is the impact of inflation, and also how to solve for it. The pattern of the questions remain the same. That is a strategy which you can choose. Like, you can revise things from the magazine or you can choose to write. But the problem is, how many things will you write? It's better to read it so that once you revise it from whatever compilation you're reading, it becomes easy. But if you just go to the compilation, you will not have any context. So read it repeatedly, it gets registered. So when you revise, you will know it. So this is a risk. Like, if you want to make notes, you can definitely go for it. For example, this class should give you a better idea what to make notes of and what to not make notes of. If you want to, definitely. Problem why we don't suggest, because you'll end up making 5,000 pages. Because everything looks important. And then when you have 5,000 pages, how do you revise? So you put too much of effort and then don't revise, you'll not be able to solve. So take your call if you can do this. If you have the ability, definitely do it. This is why analysis of previous year should be done, so that you know what to write and what to read. Now, inflation basic concepts and inflation measurement. This is 2019. This is with respect to measurement of inflation. How is inflation measured in India? What are the different indices? The most basic is GDP, deflator, and then you have CPI and. Now basics, what are these? Who releases? What exactly is the frequency? What are the food items? Everything you have to know. Inflation, not just the basics, but how Indian context mein inflation operates, you have to prepare. Weightage of food is CPI is higher than WPI. WPI is an index which is nearby the producer level. India does not have a producer index. This is why we use the wholesale. And nearby the consumer. And both of these indices are specially compiled and designed. So if you want to measure at consumer level, will we give more weightage to food or not? It does not capture changes in services, which CPI does. And Reserve Bank of India has adopted WPI as its key measure. This is true, it doesn't capture, CPI captures services because consumer have both for services and goods. RBI has adopted WPI as its key measure. It is CPI. Monetary policy का एक objective है. That is, what is the objective of monetary policy? Price stability without compromising growth or managing growth. That means price stability or managing price. And how exactly what we are going to target? We have a inflation targeting regime. That means we target inflation, not interest rate, money supply or anything else. This inflation target is on CPI. To control price, you can counter money supply, you can target interest rate, or you can target inflation directly. India does inflation targeting and targets CPI 4 plus minus 2. This target is given by whom? See, these dynamics have to be prepared. Everything related to this. Who gives the target? Committee. Which committee? Monetary Policy Committee. Who achieves it? You are giving a target to yourself. Rank 1, first attempt. It's government in consultation with RBI and gives it to the Monetary Policy Committee. This target is set for 5 years, 17 to 22, then 22 onwards also it has been continued. Monetary Policy Committee was a new thing introduced. It was not, earlier the function was with RBI. Now it's members from outside also. All these dynamics have to be prepared. It's a related question. Is it clear how inflation works in the Indian economy? This is also important. Which one of the following is likely to be most inflationary in its effect? This is cause of inflation. What causes inflation? Repayment of public debt, borrowing from public to finance a budget deficit, borrowing from the banks to finance a budget deficit, and creation of new money to finance a budget deficit. Money supply, if it increases and output doesn't change, it is the most inflationary. Here money supply is not changing because this is the already created money in the economy. Someone else is taking. This is new money being created without change in output. Most inflationary. So when we discuss inflation, the first thing is what is inflation, how it is measured. The second is what causes inflation. Third is what impact inflation has. Then fourth is how to control inflation. So these dynamics, you have various questions. One of the causes of inflation is increase in demand. With reference to the Indian economy, demand pull inflation. In fact, this is demand pull inflation related to what? Will be caused by what? This is your aggregate demand, this is your aggregate. ये आपके prices हैं और ये आपका output है. What we are saying is demand is increasing. This is called as increase in price level is inflation. This is demand pull. What are the factors that cause demand pull? Expansionary policies. Expansionary policies means the government is spending more and RBI is also giving more money supply. Both the things will mean more demand. Aggregate demand is nothing but demand of these four actors. This means more demand. Fiscal stimulus. Fiscal stimulus again means government is spending more. Inflation index wages. Higher purchasing power. Higher purchasing power means consumers can spend more. Rising interest rate. If interest rates are increased in the economy, loans will be cheaper or costly? Costly, that means both the people cannot take loans, either the household or the firms. That means aggregate demand is going to fall. You eliminate 5 and you get the answer 1, 2 and 4. Why this is not an answer? Inflation indexing wages is going to increase in cost. So this is cost push inflation. We are asking demand pull inflation. Is it clear? What factors lead to demand? This is pushing my cost of production. This is a cost push factor. These two and this is demand linked. Even this is demand linked, but it's not causing inflation, it's causing the opposite. Is it clear? How? Basics. Any producer, if its wages is increasing, his cost of production is increasing. किसी भी producer का labor का cost is increasing. Is it increasing his cost of production? cost push. These are demand factors. This is what inflation basics you will have to. ये demand push है, ये cost push है. Demand pull, cost push. Various factors, both. With reference to Indian economy, a related question on exchange rates and inflation. If inflation is too high, RBI is going to buy government security. Is it going to buy or is it going to sell? If inflation is too high, is it going to buy? Buy करने पे क्या होगा? If it is going to buy, it is going to give money. If it is going to give money, it will cause more inflation. We want, if inflation is too high, will it buy or sell? It will sell and absorb. So one is not correct, you get the answer. But if rupee is rapidly depreciating, RBI is likely to sell dollars. If rupee is rapidly depreciating, that means rupee is going from 70 to say 90, rapidly depreciating. What will RBI do? It is trying to control this movement. How will it bring it back? Supply should be increased. RBI is to sell dollars. If interest rate in US were to fall, that is likely to induce RBI to buy dollars. If interest rate in US falls, what will happen? Interest rate is decreasing. What will happen? Money will inflow in India because वहाँ नहीं मिल रहा return, India में मिलेगा return. If too much of dollar comes in the Indian economy, what will happen? Appreciation. Appreciation will lead to what? Exports will fall. And if exports fall, this is a problem for India. What will RBI do? RBI will buy dollar, sell rupees. RBI is going to buy if interest rate is falling. Sterilization. Excess dollar in Indian economy has to be sterilized. Is it clear? Just write the relations somewhere on the paper, you are going to get it. Once you understand the basic relations of exchange rate, money supply, these questions are going to be easy. In the post-pandemic recent past, many central banks worldwide have carried out interest rate hikes. Are interest rate increasing worldwide? Recently, after the pandemic, is US seeing record inflation? If US is seeing record inflation, what will US do? Interest rates increase or decrease? In the post-pandemic recent past, many central banks have carried out. This is something you have to read, newspaper. That post-pandemic, हर जगह inflation हो रही है. They have increased the interest rates. Central banks generally assume that they have the ability to counteract the rising consumer prices via monetary policy means. Central banks assume that they can counteract the rising inflation by monetary policy. Is this the function of the central bank? To counteract rising prices, that is to control inflation through monetary policy. This is what monetary policy has to do. Both 1 and 2 are correct. 2 is the reason for 1. Is it clear? How dynamic and static both have been mixed. Dynamic ये हो रहा है कि नहीं हो रहा है? ये क्यों हो रहा है? What is monetary policy का objective? Is it clear? Money monetary policy, how questions are asked? Next dimension is government. Government fiscal policy has 3 things, or even before we start that, any economy, if we differentiate it on functions, there are 3 functions. One is government, the other is the real sector, and then you have the financial sector. We are interested in this sector here. What exactly is the role of the government and how they perform that role? This performance of role and how they perform will be discussed here. External policy and trade meant relations with the outside world. Monetary, how does money function in the economy? What is the functions of bank? Fiscal policy, what does this part do? Real sector is talking about the production and consumption, and financial sector helping these 2 sectors deal with finances, money. Government function, provide public goods and services, and second, redistribution. Redistribution, taking tax, spending those taxes is providing goods. If expenditure is more than tax, the government will have debt. दो major functions होता है, providing non-marketable goods and services, for example road, electricity, water, and collecting tax and redistributing. These two are the major functions. If expenditure is more than the taxes, you will have deficit. So basic understanding of government functioning and these terms. What is expenditure? What are different types of expenditure? What is debt? How is government debt calculated? What is deficit? So terminologies and the impact of all of this. So if the government increases tax, what is going to happen? If government increases expenditure, what is going to happen? So the pattern of asking questions remain the same. Asking basic terms and cause and effect. That is understanding how the economy operates in terms of government. Fiscal is government. First, 2019, a question on debt. Most of India's external debt is owed by government entities. All of India's external debt is denominated in US dollars. So one was debt, basics of debt, and then second, India's debt profile. Every year, there is going to be a report on India's debt profile, which is going to be covered in the newspaper also. That what is debt, who owns what, who owes how much, and what is the denomination, long term hai, short term hai. So complete debt profile, a report is released by the government, which is covered in the newspaper, and similar statistics have been given in survey also. So from there you get to solve these questions. Most of India's external debt is owed by government. Is it owed by government? Who? Private companies. It's external commercial borrowing. All of India's external debt is denominated in US. It's asking all. It is in other currencies also, including rupees. In context of the Indian economy, non-financial debt includes which of the following? Now what would be non-financial debt? What would be non-financial debt? I told you, economy if divided into functional differentiation, you have financial sector, you have, and you have. They are asking non-financial debt, debt of government and housing loans owned by household. Production and consumption is real. Households will be in real sector. Amounts outstanding on credit cards. Credit card is taken by whom? Households, part of real. Treasury bills. Government. Answer would be. The functional classification of an economy is government, real and financial. Anything which is non-financial means government and real. Whatever they have borrowed becomes their debt. Is it clear how differential function? Because you need to understand, whenever we discuss fiscal policy, we have to start with one thing, कि government करना क्या है. There you define what other people are doing. Real sector is the production sector. Firms, non-financial firms. It's the consumption sector, households. Financial sector is banks, which provide intermediation function to them. You can save, you can take a loan. This sector is meant to help these two. Why it is called real and why it is called financial? Because financial, for example, money, bond, stocks, they are not real entities. Real entities is production of goods and service. वो सिर्फ created commodity है. Money is created. Is it real? Is bond real? Does it signify anything? This is all created financial sector just to help these two. Real is where production happens. This is how non-financial debt, the question was asked. Basics of financial government. Now expenditure of the government. This is public investment. Whenever the government does an expenditure, the expenditure can be of two types. It can be an expenditure that is revenue expenditure. The other expenditure can be capital expenditure, is also called as investment. Capex, capital formation, is also called as investment. So expenditure done by the government on capital head is called as public investment. Expenditure done for day-to-day expenses is called as revenue. The difference between the two is capital expenditure will either create an asset or a reduce liability or change your asset liability. कुछ भी हो सकता है, asset liability पे impact आएगा. Revenue has no impact on asset liability. So if I have to have an impact on asset liability, this is a capital expenditure. Fixing MSP for agriculture produce, is it changing the asset or liability? If I'm giving MSP to the farmers, is it changing my asset or liability? This is day-to-day basis. This is not public investment. Computerization of credit society. Computerization means I am creating an social capital development. This is also asset development. Free electricity supply. Is supply giving me anything? Waiver of loans. Setting up of cold storage. Is it creating asset? So you understand how classification of government's expenditure is revenue and capital. Capital expenditure को ही बोल रहे हैं हम investment. A lot of questions are on this front only. Now, which of the following step is likely to be taken at a time of economic recession? Economic recession, you need to know the meaning of the term, growth related. What is recession? Negative growth rate. 2 quarter negative growth rate means recession. Now, what will the government do if there is a recession? Your GDP comes from consumption, investment. We are asking, what will government do to increase this GDP, right? Recession has to be tackled, मतलब growth बढ़ानी है, तो GDP बढ़ाना है. What will the government do to increase GDP? It will cut tax rate. Tax rate cut will mean what? People can spend more, but increase in interest rate. If we increase interest rate, what will happen? Less loan. That means ये नहीं हो सकता, दोनों अलग है. Increase in expenditure on public projects. If the government starts spending more, will it increase GDP? Increase in tax rates, reduction of interest. Tax increase होगा तो what will happen here? Less? Not. And if the government reduces expenditure on public projects, government expenditure is falling. That means what will the government do? Government can tax, government can spend, or government can borrow. These 3 implications, what implications on recession? Is it clear? Again, we are following the same pattern, terms, cause, effect. You need to know the meaning and you need to know what will lead to what. Indian government bond yield are influenced by which of the following? Now, if the government has more expenditure than what revenue it collects, will it have to borrow? If government revenue is less, expenditure is more, तभी हो सकता है जब borrow किया है. How does the government borrow? The government issues a security or a bond in the market. People subscribe to it and give government the money. This security or a bond will have a face value जितना government को पैसे चाहिए. Issued a bond of say 10,000 crore. This government security will have a interest rate or the coupon rate. If you are taking money from someone, will you have to offer interest? And this government security, this means face value interest rate will decide what is my yield. Yield is what is the return people are getting on interest rate or on the government security. For example, if the government has issued a 100 rupees bond with an interest rate of 5%, face value is 100, coupon rate is 5. The yield from this bond, if held for maturity, maturity means time period for 1 year, this will be rupees 5. Is it clear what are the meaning of the terms? Expenditure is more than the revenue, the government will borrow. It will borrow by issuing a government security. The person who has bought this government security seeing yield as 5 rupees, what if he wants 100 rupees back? After 6 months, he doesn't want to wait for 1 year for the government. Government is going to give you this only after 1 year. Rate of return of a government bond is fixed. After 1 year, you're going to get this only. But what if I want the money after 6 months? Then I can sell. Whoever is holding can sell a bond to someone else. The buying or selling of this bond, this is called as the bond price. Now, when you are selling this bond price for whatever price, will it sell at the same price? Why? Because I will check this person who wants to buy, will he check what return he has to get here? अब person A cannot increase this. 5% ज़्यादा दे नहीं सकते तो government देगी. I can't increase the coupon rate. That means I can sell it for less than 100 or more than 100. Then only his return will be satisfied because वो interest तो change नहीं कर सकता. But can he say that I'm going to buy at 97? And when it will mature, I will get 105. That means my rate of return is 8, not rate of return, return. That means this bond price and yield will depend on what the market situation is. How will I demand 8 rupees? By chance, if bank is offering me money at 8%, that means I've put 100, I'm getting 108. So bond ko bhi itna dena padega. That means there are market factors which will impact the bond price, which will impact the yield. Question is, yield will be influenced by which of the following? Did you understand the phenomena? This person cannot change the interest rate because that has been promised by government. So if he wants to give a return to him, he can only change the price. कि मैंने 100 का लिया था, आप 97 ले लो. या मैंने 100 का लिया था, आप 103 का ले लो. Depends, this 97 or 103 will depend on what market is. Alternatives क्या है? Question is asking ये yield किस पे depend करता है? Actions of US Fed Reserve, actions of Reserve Bank of India, inflation and short-term interest rate. All of the three will influence what the return is in the market and therefore will influence the yield. We discuss in detail how it happens, but the question is generic here. But to understand how yield will be impacted, because I will ask for a yield depending on what my alternative options are. So yield, when the government also sets, will depend on what the alternate options are. This is how all of the three will impact. Is it clear what is borrowing yield and everything? We'll have to go in detail. Actions of US Reserve will have an impact on exchange rate, will have an impact on interest rates. More money coming in, less money, so you have to go into detail there. But you understand what type of questions? Ye samjhana abhi. Which one of the following have effects of creation of black money in the Indian economy? Understand what is black money? Unaccounted for. So what's the problem if money is unaccounted for? This is what they've asked. Black money means diversion of resources to some other unproductive purpose, investment in unproductive activities, large donations to political parties, or loss of. This is why you need to read the question. ये भी तीनों हो सकते हैं answer. But the answer is asking the most appropriate. This is the biggest problem. All of the four can be the answer. You have to find the most appropriate answer. This is why read the options carefully. Because black money definitely can lead to more purchase of real estate and luxury. This doesn't add to the production in the economy. So my production flow can be reduced, output reduced ho sakta hai because this is not creating anything. Same thing here. So most appropriate answer is this. You always have to read the four options and find the most appropriate answer. Black money related to taxation policy. Which of the following constitute real sector in the economy? There are three sectors in the economy. Government, financial and real. Real sector, farmers harvesting crops, production. Textile means converting raw material. Is this both production function? Commercial bank lending money, production or financial? Corporate body listing bonds, financial. Is it clear? Base has to be what are the functions. Government functions ke baad hi taxation, expenditure and everything starts. Two basic questions were asked, non-financial debt and real sector, based on our understanding ke government kar kya rahi hai. Is it clear? With reference made to the expenditure made by the organization, which of the following are correct? Expenditure can be revenue, expenditure can be capital. Acquiring new technologies, capital expenditure. How? Asset. Debt financing is considered capital expenditure while equity financing is considered revenue. Debt financing means you are taking a loan, that is liability. Liability means capital expenditure. Equity finance is considered revenue. Equity finance means what? You are giving shares, that means you are diluting the ownership of your asset. Will it be revenue? Is it clear? Classification of investment only. This is last year, 2022. Classification of investment, expenditure, capital and revenue. This is how this can be done. With reference to Indian economy, consider the following statements. A share of the household financial saving goes towards government borrowings. If anyone has to borrow in the economy, from where is the money coming from that borrowing? Banking. From where is the money? Anyone wants to invest. From where is that money coming? In any economy, there is a fund surplus sector which saves. And one is a fund deficit which wants to invest, doesn't have the money for it. So is saving mostly कौन कर रहा है economy में? Bank is not saving. Household is saving in the bank. Household is giving that money, right? Now, total savings will be constant at one point. Whoever is saving, firms or whatever, will be total. That means I have cumulative savings which I can give to invest. अब ये savings किस किस को मिल सकती हैं? Either the firms who wants to invest or the why? Why would the government borrow? Because government doesn't have enough tax. That means this can be either this or can be a share of household saving goes towards government borrowings. From where else is government going to borrow? Household की savings आएंगी or savings from anyone, it would be savings only. Dated securities issued at market rates in auctions form a large component of internal debt. I told you we have to know what is the debt profile of India. Debt profile में one of the thing is whether we are having long term debt or we are having short term debt. और किस instrument से लिया है? Government security can be of two types depending on maturity. If it is 1 year, it is called as a, and if it is longer, it is called as dated security. Dated securities issued at market rates in auctions form a large component of internal debt. Government debt could be long or short. Long debt will mean dated more than 1 year. This is larger part of internal debt. Basic knowing the terms and what is the present situation every year from survey and your report, newspapers will give you information. But is the term clear how debt dynamics are being covered? Consider the following. For the horizontal devolution, the 15th Finance Commission used how many? This is this year, and this question has been asked multiple times. Finance Commission. Again related to government. Why is Finance Commission created? One of the functions of the government is to collect taxes. Who collects most of the taxes? But who does most of the development? That means center's money has to be given to the states. Who decides how much money? Finance Commission. Finance Commission, how much to total states and then how much to? For this, the Finance Commission gives a principle. उस principle में क्या क्या आता है? And this is often asked in the paper. Tax money is done by the center, but most of the development happens through state. So first thing you have to do is vertical devolution. How much of this money will be with the center? How much will be the, then total money with the state, how much each state will get? You have different factors. 15th Finance Commission had domestic demographic performance, forest ecology and this. There was nothing on political ground, so answer would be all only 3. Finance Commission related questions are coming both in prelims and mains. और ये government का function भी है, तो fiscal policy we have to cover. Is it clear? Consider the investments in following assets: brand recognition, inventory, intellectual property, mailing list. Which of the following are intangible investments? What is tangible? What is intangible? Something you can see or feel. Inventory is tangible. Brand recognition. Intellectual property. Mailing list. Intangible. Mailing list is something you can't touch or feel. Email. It's intangible. Right? Don't get confused with list. कि paper पे लिख लें तो और फिर तो touch and feel हो जाएगा. Is it clear? All of the three are investment. Mailing list of clients. This is how e-commerce or any digital companies are growing. This is their asset. Compiling information of people is their asset. Remember what is intangible or investment? Creation of asset. Definition based question hai sirf, and this is what they've asked this year. Macroeconomics part is clear. '58th. Yes. I told you need to know the debt profile of the government. Who owns what? Outside, inside, both. This is covered in a report which talks about the debt profile of India, monthly and quarterly and yearly also. So that yearly reports gives complete information. Same information you can find in economic survey also. So now if I want to know, one question was on external debt, who borrows more out and what currency. This is asking internal debt, the government debt, is dated securities, T-bills or what? So I would need to know the profile of the government debt, then I can tell what dated securities are or T-bills are. So I will have to cover that because there are questions there. Every year there is a report, not if you don't find the report or if you missed it from the newspaper, survey definitely mentions this. Debt profile of the government. Survey is talking about India's economic performance on certain factors. The first 4-5 chapters of survey would be external performance, would be inflation and prices, would be monetary policy and fiscal policy, which we discussed 4. The next 4 will be sectoral performance, which we'll discuss now. Definitely, if you don't understand the basic terms first, how will you make sense of economic survey? For example, how would you know what is a dated security? First, you have to cover the basics. It would be similar only. You can definitely go through this report right now itself because a lot of things would not change. It would be on similar lines only. If you want to get an idea, you can get it from there also. Right now, just Google it, you'll find the report. Now the second thing is how Indian economy is doing. The first macroeconomics part is clear. So we have situated the whole preparation on macroeconomics. The type of questions were 3, terms, cause effect, and third was Indian context performance on all 3. The next is specific sectoral performance India. Yahan pe facts hain. You have to know what was introduced when, because all of this Indian economy sectors, I've mentioned these 2 separately, though part of services, banking and financial markets, because very important significance because you have a lot of questions from this sector. Now these things, you are going to have a question on, you need to understand what is the sector, you need to understand the present performance, and present performance you will understand when you know the past also. That means 47 onwards, how Indian economy has performed. And whatever the issues have been, those issues would have certain solution. So this is the domain of the questions asked here, and those solutions are both schemes and the solutions are also domestic institutions. And now these questions mostly would be fact based. You can't take a guess here if you don't know the facts. The previous one was just based on understanding. This is, you would have to, anything you analyze, you first have to know the facts, what are you analyzing. For example, agriculture, you first would have to know what MSP is, then only you will tell the crop. And now see how UPSC is moving ahead in those questions. First they asked, what are the crops on which MSP is announced? Now in 2023, what they have done is, out of those crops, they have picked one crop and asked features of that crop. So we already knew the question could come on MSP, we know we cover that topic, but you're not preparing all those 22 crops which are there in MSP, now you'll have to do that. See, understand, if the question paper has to give you new questions, they will have to evolve from the same topic. The paper can get tough, you can't completely rely on what was happening in 2015 or 2016. You have to see 2022 to 2023 to decide what the question will be. No longer will you have report indices or inflation. Consider inflation or ये basic concept जो हैं fiscal policy के, इसमें भी questions word मुश्किल होंगे. English would be difficult or options would be difficult. Similarly, in Indian economy also, the coverage would be vast. You have to have a good understanding. With lesser information you can't solve. And all of this information is going to be important because mains syllabus is completely centered around this. Mains में you don't have what is, say what is the basic things about inflation, what causes inflation, वो question नहीं आते. Mains में it's completely sector dominated, specifically this. Banking, finance not mentioned in the syllabus, so they will not be asked, but growth, development definitely. Agriculture definitely, industry definitely, reforms in Indian economy definitely. So this part is also important for mains because you can't analyze if you don't know the facts. But this has to be mostly fact based, concepts कम होंगे यहाँ पे. Is it clear? That first part was completely conceptual. Now we'll see different sectors, how it is happening. The first part was the India's growth and growth related concepts such as poverty, inequality and unemployment. Poverty, how is poverty measured in India? What are the different committees? What exactly their recommendations were? In a given year, official poverty lines are higher in some states than in others. In 1993, how do you define poverty? What is poverty? Below the line, what is the line? Not able to get? What is basic? Park, water, sanitation, और कुछ? Internet is basic? अब हो गया है तो poverty में होना चाहिए वो definition. Why? Internet should not be basic. You think right now any commerce or any activities you can do without internet? Then this is why definition of poverty, it keeps on evolving with time. This is why India committees has been set up to define this and also tell what the basic needs are. Because basic needs evolve with time. Something 1993 definition would not include internet expenditure. But if you want to cover poverty, definitely you would have to include that type of expenditure also. So throughout time, India has created a lot of committees to get this definition. One of the committees created in 1993 is the Lucknow committee. One of the recommendations of the Lucknow committee was that states cannot have the same poverty line. You have to have state-specific poverty line because the prices are different. So Indian economy, how is poverty defined? It has seen various phases, it has seen various committees. One of the committees talked about state-specific poverty line, the national poverty line. Yes, it should exist, but states should have their own. This is why. Definition में जो basket of goods हैं, जो essential हैं, वो same रहेंगे. But in basket of goods का price अलग होगा state में. इसलिए state-specific poverty line होनी चाहिए. This is what he said. Is it clear how Indian economy performance-based, how we measure it in India? We are not talking about poverty measurement in other parts of the country or other parts of the world. Macroeconomics, poverty, other parts we are not talking in detail, but we will talk about India. We will talk about the multidimensional. You can have questions on this. India's growth part. With reference to India's 5-year plans, consider the following statements. From second 5-year plan, there was a determined thrust towards substitution of basic and capital goods. What did India choose in 1956? Heavy industry, basic and capital? Question is asking substitution. Were we substituting basic and capital? They wanted to say import substitution, but they missed out the word import. They mean import substitution here. The fourth 5-year plan adopted objective of correcting earlier trend of increased concentration of wealth and economic power. What is fourth 5-year plan? Time period, any idea? Second 5-year plan is 56. 56 to 61 is third. So 56 to 61 is second. 61 to 66 is third. 66 to 69 is holiday. 69 to 74 is fourth. So are we talking about reduced concentration of power in fourth? Yes, Indira Gandhi, Garibi Hatao. This is true. Fifth 5-year plan, for the first time, financial sector was included. It was included in 9th 5-year plan. So how Indian economy has progressed, what were the 5-year plans, their content has been asked. Growth and development in India, planning. This is a very difficult question. With reference to the Indian economy, after 1991 economic liberalization, consider the following statements. Now Niti Aayog comes out with a report which talks about employment patterns in India. There are various employment patterns report recently also, last year, what the employment patterns are after pandemic. 17, this question was asked in 2020, and there was a report in 2017 which was talking about these employment patterns. Now these employment patterns is something which we ought to know how exactly Indian economy is performing. In that they talked about how 2004-5 ke baad, a lot of people dropped out of rural workforce and started finding work in. And from this time period also, India's female labor force participation rate kept on declining. Now this is an observation given by them in one of the reports. We can't prepare this report in detail. We don't know whether this question is going to come again or not. Such type of questions have not been asked. This was one outlier. Because the features which they have asked are quite difficult if you see. Worker productivity increased. at 2004 prices while it decreased in rural areas. Percentage share of rural areas in workforce increased. Rural areas growth in non-farm economy increased. Growth rate in rural employment decreased. Now, knowing the employment patterns and that too for a very long period of time, this is a very difficult question. Source also, this is not recommended that you read it, but you need to have a general idea on employment patterns in India. Who is employed where and how patterns have evolved after 91 or before 91. Based on that understanding, if you can solve this question, well and good. But you're not going to find more sources for finding such questions. A basic understanding on India's growth process and how exactly India creates employment. Especially 91 के बाद ऐसा क्या हुआ है? After 91, most of the growth has come from the market, and one major feature here has been that agriculture has been neglected. That means if market is bringing more growth, that is through industrial services, and which has brought more growth? Industry, services, and wherever IT sector has produced growth, the low productivity work, for example construction, for example other services, maids and all of these jobs have been increased. But इस job को कहाँ मिलेगा? Rural or urban? This is how you can do the question here. Knowing about the Indian growth patterns, knowing about employment patterns, getting the report is difficult. Otherwise, report is also available. Now see, percentage share of rural areas in the workforce steadily increased. Share of rural areas in the workforce. If more of my jobs are being created in the urban areas, will the percentage share of rural areas increase? This statement is not correct. In rural areas, the growth in non-farm economy increased. Even in rural areas, agriculture has been neglected. People are finding other work, construction, Manrega, any other work. That means this could be possible. Growth rate in rural employment decreased. Definitely when people are shifting to urban, growth rate of rural will decrease. So based on your understanding of Indian economy, growth patterns, employment, you can solve this question. Otherwise, getting to the source is difficult. Understand how this can be solved. This is not correct. Answer would be 3, 4. 1 is a very big question. But a mushkil question tha ye. But this is an outlier question. What we prepare is the Indian growth story. Basically what is happening right from 47 till date. 91 के बाद ऐसा क्या हुआ agriculture में and what all. Why are we calling Indian economy as jobless growth? Because after 91 this was neglected. This we could not create jobs. यहाँ से growth आ गई. Growth but jobless. This is how you can attempt this question based on your understanding of Indian economy. This is a regular report which you can see because 19 के बाद उल्टा हो रहा है. After pandemic, ruralization has started. People are going back to the agriculture. So they have reported all that in this. They have given data also on that. Self-help group. Why is this question asked here in economics? How? Governance. Governance में तो है ही ये topic. Not after pandemic. How does India deal with poverty? How does India deal with poverty? One of the most earliest scheme of India is integrated rural development program, where we started creating a lot of self-help groups. कि लोगों को इकट्ठा लेके आओ एक ग्रुप में और उनको एक बैंक का लोन दो, so that they can start an economic activity. This was started as this. Now it is called as the NRLM and NULM. Strategy यही है, self-help group promote करो. Poverty alleviation technique in India is self-help group. Now what's the benefit of this self-help group? If people take loan as a group, they are more likely to return the loan as compared to individuals. The whole point of doing this program was that if you give it to a group, the repayment rates are high because there's peer pressure. Individuals have low. This was popularized by Muhammad Yunus in Bangladesh, the Grameen Bank model. He got a Nobel Prize also, which India also is following. In SHG, all members of the group take responsibility which an individual member takes. Was originally initiated by SBI. Now you need to know the Indian growth story ke kisne kiya tha. It was not SBI, it was NABARD. UPSC has asked multiple questions on this in mains. Specific questions on self-help group bank linkage program, because this is one of the most effective poverty alleviation scheme. रीजनल रूरल बैंक्स एंड शेड्यूल कमर्शियल बैंक सपोर्ट HSGs, वो NABARD इन्हीं को कहता है इनको लोन दो. So this is correct. Answer here would be only. So you see how two things are related. India's performance, poverty, and how is solution. Or solution कब start हुआ, roughly you need to know. Another important thing, most of the questions are here, that is banking. India's banking, how we've started from 47, what is happening in banking right now, everything is a probable question. Service area approach was implemented under the purview of IRDP, Lead Bank Scheme, Manrega, or National Skill Development Mission. One of the things that India was facing a problem right when we started banks was that banks were not going in the rural areas. Very less of capital availability to agriculture, and they were not opening branches in rural areas. So first thing we did was nationalized banks in same year we introduced a scheme which was called as लीड बैंक. लीड बैंक में गवर्नमेंट ने एक बैंक को सेलेक्ट करके रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी दी कि आप अपने डिस्ट्रिक्ट में बैंकिंग फैसिलिटीज अवेलेबल, यू विल बी रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर प्लानिंग द बैंकिंग इन योर एरिया. दिस वॉज लीड बैंक. बट दिस प्रॉब्लम still persisted because the lead bank used to give benefits to only one section of district which was accessible to it, where it had more population. Rest of the areas it was not getting anything. What the government did in 1980s, later 80s, started a service area approach. What it said was, हर बैंक का एक particular service area देंगे जहाँ उनको plan करना है. So now district has been broken down into various smaller areas which the lead bank has to prepare for providing all bank service. This is how banking was made to the last mile delivery के सारी services हों. This was your making lead bank better. Now this scheme is not that how many schemes have to be prepared. इसका context है banking, you have to know, you have to prepare. India's economy, one sector which is very important is banking and financial markets, from where a lot of questions come, which you have to prepare in entirety. It's not about the scheme which they're asking. It's asking whether you know the context of service area approach कि हो क्या रहा था. Is it clear? What is the purpose of intercreditor agreement signed by Indian banks and financial institutions recently? This is the year 2019 when a lot of government solutions were coming for solving NPA. One of the solutions for solving NPA was given by a Sunil Mehta committee, which goes by the name of Project Sashakt. Sashakt में 5 points दिए थे, जिसमें the second point said, first point said that if loans are small, banks can themselves do it. 50 करोड़ के लोन banks खुद solve करेंगे. If loans are 50 करोड़, 200 करोड़ or 200 करोड़, they are going to be solved by an intercreditor agreement. What is intercreditor agreement? अब जिसने बड़ा लोन लिया उसने एक बैंक से तो नहीं लिया. That means it has taken money from various banks and banks and financial institutions. They together are going to sign to solve it. So the problem, the context was NPA. One of the solution was this committee, जिसमें एक point उनका था he mentioned other things also. So UPSC asked, what is intercreditor agreement? What is the purpose? Purpose is to aim at faster resolution of stressed assets of 50 crore or more which are under consortium lending. Consortium lending means there are multiple creditors. So intercreditor agreement will decide what to do. Is it clear how banking, present problem, you have a question. Current affairs based question hai. The chairman of public sector banks are selected by Bank Board Bureau, RBI, Union Ministry of Finance, management of concerned bank. See again, this has a reference. You had the problem of NPA. One of the problems of NPA was that management is not free. We need a professional body which is going to appoint the chairman. A committee was set up under PJ Naik to give governance reforms. Governance reforms in banking. One reform he said, you need to create an independent board called Bank Board Bureau, which is going to appoint the top persons. It's not the ministry or the government. एक independent body को करना है. और बाद में whatever banks you have created, you shift their management from government and create a bank holding company. सारे PSUs पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक्स की होल्डिंग इस एक कंपनी में दे दो, इस कंपनी को प्रोफेशनल बनाना है, so that government interference is less. And that by the time you do this, The government accepted this, and the government introduced a 7-pronged strategy called Mission इंद्रधनुष. इंद्रधनुष का एक फीचर था इंट्रोडक्शन ऑफ बैंक बोर्ड ब्यूरो. So this is how it's all contextual. It's not something coming out of the blue के बैंक्स का पूछा है. प्रॉब्लम थी, प्रॉब्लम का सोल्यूशन रिफॉर्म्स, बैंकिंग सेक्टर हैज टू बी प्रिपेयर्ड, एंड दिस वाज इन योर करंट अफेयर्स. मिशन इंद्रधनुष का वन पार्ट वाज बैंक बोर्ड ब्यूरो. Multiple questions have been asked on Bank Board Bureau. The Reserve Bank of India's recent directives related to storage of data, payment system data, known as data diktat, command the payment system. This 2018, what happened? Payment system data was being stored in data servers which was outside India. So RBI in the same year came out with a notification which said that all of the payment system data of India will have to be stored in systems only in India. This was a notification by the RBI for the banking and the payment system. This was quite a famous thing mentioned in the news. It had nothing to do with systems owned and operated by PSUs or submit their reports to CAG. Owned by PSU, CAG, this means you are a government bank or a government body now. Because accountability इनकी government bodies पे ही है, private पे नहीं है. So you can't force them to do this. This is the answer. Even if you don't know the answer, you can think about this. कि किसी भी payment system के लिए, why will we convert it into, or this systems are owned by PSUs or make it CAG? This is what the notification was, based on a development in the banking system. Answer is one only here. Consider the following statements. Structure of banking. In India, there are two types of banks, majorly. One are called as, and the other are. What is the difference? This is the banking structure. How banking structure or how banks are organized in India. What's the difference? They work for, and they work to serve the, whoever are the members. Democratic management, professional management, where the person having more shares gets the decision making. Here every member has same share. Cooperative banks in India exist in two forms, one in the rural areas and the other in urban areas, primary cooperative banks. In rural areas, it's a 3-tier structure. You have the state cooperatives, below which you have district cooperative, and below you have primary agricultural credit society. This is the structure of banking in India. Now question is, in terms of short-term credit delivery to agriculture, district central cooperatives deliver more credit in comparison to scheduled banks and RRBs. Now whenever there is a cooperative banks, will it have more resources as compared to commercial banks? If it doesn't have resource, can it give more loans to agriculture? Can a district central cooperative bank compare to scheduled? One of the examples of scheduled commercial bank is SBI. Can any DCB give more loans as compared to SBI or any other scheduled banks? So even if you don't know the fact, you know what bank has been organized how, this statement is not correct. One of the important functions of district bank is to provide funds to PACs. It is a 3-tiered structure, state, district and PACs. If PACs is in need, district helps, district is in need, state helps. State is in need, NABARD can help. This is why 3-tiered. This is how it is organized. So this is correct. So if you understand the structure of banking, this cannot happen based on how the banking is organized in India. Consider the following statements. 2021. Governor of RBI is appointed by central government. Yes? Central provisions in Constitution give central government the right to issue directions to RBI. Is anything mentioned in the Constitution about the RBI? From here you can get the answer. And why this question was asked? During this time, 2017 onwards, there was a conflict between RBI and the central government. Central government wanted lesser interest rates because lesser interest rate means easy loans. Easy loans means more growth. RBI saw inflation, it was not reducing interest rate. Conflict. There is one section in the RBI Act, Section 7. So the central government threatened the RBI that if you don't take that action, we are going to use Section 7 under which they can issue directions to the RBI in public interest. This was the point of conflict. This is why this question. If you understand basics of RBI, government and how everything operates, this would have been an easy question. It's not the constitution, it's the Section 7. Very important, covered in the newspapers. Governor draws the power from RBI Act. Is it clear how RBI and how banking has been organized in the country? With reference to urban cooperative banks, again a question on cooperative. Now why this question? There was a problem in the Punjab Maharashtra cooperative. People were taking money out, there was a problem, the government had to stop. After which, it was realized that a lot of cooperative banks are having a problem, and the government amended this act, Banking Regulation Act, introduced amendment in 2020 where it gave more powers to the RBI to control urban cooperatives. There were problems in urban cooperatives, and to solve those problems, the government amended the act in 2020 and gave more powers to the RBI to solve it. 2021, full question on UCBs. They are supervised and regulated by local boards set up by the state governments. They can issue equity shares and preference. In fact, RBI monetary functions regulate karta hai, inke supervisory functions registrar karta hai. So it's not just that, it is both. They can issue shares and preference shares. Amendment का एक feature था कि अब ये हो सकता है. This was a current affairs news, became a statement. They were brought under the purview of Banking Regulation Act through an amendment in 1966. RBI for the first time got control of urban cooperative banks in 66. So this question, you need to know what urban cooperative banks are, features, and any present development. This was a present development from which you had these two questions. Is it clear how present development of banking has a question along with a static, how banks are organized? Banking, in fact, 2016 onwards, 15 onwards, when we had so much of NPAs in the system, there were a lot of banking related developments. So a lot of UPSC prelims question came on banking related developments. Now most of the problems have been solved. The questions have shifted to capital markets. So 2019-20 onwards, a lot of questions are coming on financial markets. Central bank function of lender of last resort. RBI does a function of lender of last resort. What does it mean? That if banks fail, have any problem, we are going to give them money. Lending to trade and industry, providing liquidity to banks, lending to governments. It's not about government or industry, it's only about banks. Answer would be 2. Understanding the functioning of RBI, the powers of RBI, and also the present context. Everything in the banking sector. Again, a question in 2022 on Banks Board Bureau. Governor of RBI is the chairman. Is governor the chairman? We wanted to create an independent body. Bank Board Bureau recommends for selection of heads of public sector banks. This is why it was created. Bank Board Bureau helps the public sector banks in developing strategies and capital raising plans. Yes, this is also one of the functions. So answer would be banking related, same repeated theme, Bank Board Bureau. In India, which one of the following is responsible for maintaining price stability? Monetary policy, RBI. Indian banking structure from the start, performance right now, both of this you will have questions. Is it clear how banking has been covered? Next part is your financial markets. Financial market means your debt market, your bonds and also equity, not just debt, equity also. So debt and equity markets related developments. In this, the questions have not been quite detailed. The questions are mostly centered around the terminology. Basics, who regulates what is the structure, and mostly terms. A lot of information about financial markets is given in the newspaper, doesn't mean you have to cover it. You only need to know the structure, functions of SEBI, हाउ इज इट स्ट्रक्चर्ड, डिपॉजिटरी क्या होता है, स्टॉक ब्रोकर क्या होता है, स्टॉक मार्केट क्या है, and basic terminologies related to them. We don't have to go in too much detail. You'll understand when you see the questions. Which of the following is issued by registered foreign portfolio investors to overseas investors who want to be part of the Indian stock market? What is happening here? This is one of the instruments. Foreign portfolio investors invest in India. There are other certain foreign investors who want to invest but don't want to be regulated because this is regulated by SEBI. There are certain people who want to put in the Indian market but don't want to get regulated. So what happens is they give money to them and they are the ones which invest. In return of the money, they issue them P-note. Issued by registered portfolio investors to overseas investors who want to be part of the Indian without registering themselves. They give them money, in return P-note. P-note की value कहाँ से आ रही है? From whatever they have invested here. It is called as a basic terminologies. Instruments क्या है, structure क्या है, regulation क्या है. These three things only. Not going into too much details. Consider the following statements. 2020. Commercial paper is a short-term unsecured promissory note. In India or anywhere, your capital or financial market is divided into two. One is called as money market and the other is called as. The difference between the two is money market deals with instruments which have maturity up to. They deal with instrument having maturity more than 1 year. So money market has these instruments. ये सारे चारों instrument money market के हैं. Commercial paper is a short-term unsecured promissory note. एक company issue करती है if it wants to borrow for 1 year. Certificate of deposit is a long-term instrument issued by RBI. Certificate of deposit is issued by a bank. If it wants to borrow up to 1 year, it takes money from the people and issues them certificate of deposit. It's not long-term, it is money market. Call money is a short-term finance used for interbank transactions. If banks want to borrow from each other, it is called as call, notice or term. Call money is 1 day, notice is 14 day, term is 14 day to 1 year. So I can borrow from the interbank market at call money. Call money is a short-term finance used for interbank transactions. Zero coupon bonds are interest-bearing short-term bonds issued by this. Zero coupon. What was coupon? I told you every bond has a coupon rate. What is interest rate? When it is saying zero coupon, can it be interest-bearing? Zero coupon means no interest. So answer would be 1 and 3. Basic terminologies, instruments. With reference to India, consider the following statements. Retail investors through demat account can invest in treasury bills and government of India debt bonds in primary market. Can retail investors, that is investors having less money, small amounts, can they invest in government bonds directly? 2021, this was the question. 2020, the government introduced a scheme called the RBI introduced called the Retail Direct Scheme. The Retail Direct Scheme under which this was allowed. And on what platform you can buy, it was called as NDSOM. इस platform पे आप directly buy कर सकते हो. Primary market means when it is issued for the first time. Earlier it was secondary or primary में it was not direct. Now an RDG account will be opened with the RBI. You can borrow directly, buy this security directly. इस portal पे मिलेगा. Central Depository. Is this clear how the scheme was? Gave the question. Central Depository. You know what a demat account is? What is demat? What is the significance of demat? You will, whatever security you buy, whether shares or bond, it will be in a dematerialized form, not in physical format. With whom do you open a demat account? This is called as a depository participant. ये बैंक हो सकता है, NBFC से कोई भी हो सकता है. This depository participant is allowed because every stock exchange has a own depository. Depository is the place where everything gets stored. Your interface is with the participant. Depository, every stock exchange has its own. In India, we have two, Bombay Stock Exchange and National Stock Exchange ka own depository. For Bombay Stock Exchange, it is called as, so structure of the market and a scheme. Central depository is promoted by RBI and Bombay Stock Exchange, not by the RBI. Answer, banks, baki banks hai, it's with Bombay Stock Exchange. Answer here is 1 and 2. So a scheme in the capital market, 2 questions, what is happening, where it is happening, and third, a question on one of the participants of the market, what is depository. Another instrument, inflation index bonds. What is inflation indexed? Bond ka feature tha that bond is going to give you a coupon rate. What if the coupon rate on the bond is less than inflation? You put 100 rupees and money 5% is what you get, but inflation was, is it a loss making? So government said we are going to link the bond with inflation. तो आपको जो interest मिलेगा, it will be linked to inflation. For example, inflation plus 1%. Government can reduce the coupon rate on its borrowing by the way of inflation. How can government reduce the coupon rate by inflation index bond? First, inflation index protects to the investors from uncertainty regarding inflation. Is this correct? Now, how can government reduce the coupon rate on its borrowing by inflation indexed? Government को ये rate कम करना है. Can it reduce? How? Government has to pay the coupon. We are saying अगर ये bond issue किया तो government reduce कर सकती है coupon अपना. How? Yes, if we control inflation, will my coupon rate be less? So can I reduce my coupon rate by inflation indexed? आपने interest क्या दिया है? CPI plus 1%. So if the government is successful in controlling inflation, will the government coupon rate be less? The interest received as well as capital gains are not taxable. They are taxable. So basic features, instrument ka taxable structure, you have to have an idea. Is it clear, inflation index bond, how it is working? Consider the following statements. In India, credit rating agencies are regulated by RBI. Are they regulated by RBI? They are regulated by SEBI. Brickwork ratings ka, there was certain fiasco. SEBI asked them to close down. This is why broader question on credit rating. Credit rating agency is part of your market. What does credit rating agency do? Stock markets ka, or in fact your financial markets ka is part. You know what is CIBIL? What is CIBIL? Credit score of an individual based on which banks give you loans. Similarly, financial markets ke instruments, you should know how credible they are. For example, if you want to invest in a bond of a company, how will you know how credible they are? This is the role of credit rating. They give credit ratings. So who regulates them? SEBI. Special agencies hai. Is it clear? Structure of the market. With reference to convertible bonds, consider the following statements. There are 2 ways in which a company can raise money. One is by issuing debt, that means by issuing a bond. Other way is by not taking a debt but by equity, where company gives shares of the company to someone else. When it gives shares to someone else, is it taking a debt? If a company, someone holding 100% sells 10% of the shares, that means his holding drops to this 10%. Is it a debt? But if it issues a bond, is it a debt? There are 2 instruments, debt instrument, bond, and equity shares. This is not a debt instrument, you give ownership. Convertible bonds are those which can be converted into equity. So a company issued a bond of say 100 rupees and said after 1 year, you can take 10 shares and don't take 100 back. Convert the debt into equity. This is as there is an option to exchange the bond for equity, convertible bonds pay a lower rate of interest. If I give someone an option to buy equity, will it have a lower interest? if there is a bond which can be converted and a bond which cannot be converted, will the interest rate be lower in a convertible bond? There is one bond which gives no opportunity to convert and the other gives an opportunity. Which will have a lower interest rate? Why? These 10 bonds will be received at a price which is the market price. And in the other end, you are only going to rupees 100 or whatever 5% return you're getting. तो यहाँ पे आपका रिटर्न मार्केट लिंक नहीं है, यहाँ आपका रिटर्न मिलेगा मार्केट प्राइस पे आपको शेयर्स मिल रहे हैं. डेफिनेटली इट इज गोइंग टू गिव मी लेसर इंटरेस्ट. इज इट क्लियर? 10 शेयर्स का प्राइस एक साल पहले अलग है, एक साल बाद अलग होगा. आई हैव एन ऑप्शन टू टेक दैट. दैट मीन्स दिस बॉन्ड इज गोइंग टू गिव मी लेसर. इज इट क्लियर? The option to convert to equity affords the bondholder a degree of indexation to rising consumer price. Indexation means covering for. Now, if someone is getting an opportunity to convert, is he getting protection to inflation? How? Yes, because now he is getting the shares at market price. Market price will reflect inflation. Bond में वही same मिलेगा, inflation कितना भी हो. Is the equity giving me an option of indexation? Is it clear how? Just understand the basics of bond. This is something you can draw out the inference. क्योंकि अब मेरे को मार्केट प्राइस में मिलेगा, तो अगर एक साल में प्राइसेस बढ़े तो शेयर के प्राइसेस भी बढ़ सकता है. बॉन्ड में तो वो नहीं मिलेगी अपॉर्चुनिटी, 100 ही वापस मिलेंगे. आई एम गेटिंग शेयर्स, शेयर्स विल बी एट मार्केट प्राइस विच विल गिव मी इंडेक्सेशन. दिस इज 2022. 2023, interest income from deposits in InvITs distributed to their investors is exempted from tax, but dividend is taxable. What are InvITs? You know what are mutual funds? What are they? Subject to market risk. What are mutual funds? Mutual funds तो सही है, सचिन बोल रहा है. What happens in mutual funds? Someone wants to invest in the stock market, but doesn't know how the stock market functions. वो पैसे एक म्यूचुअल फंड को देगा, म्यूचुअल फंड मार्केट में लगाएगा, उसके बेसिस पे रिटर्न मिलेंगे. इज इट क्लियर? सिमिलरली, इफ समवन वांट्स टू इन्वेस्ट इन इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर प्रोजेक्ट्स बट डजंट हैव एन अंडरस्टैंडिंग, दे विल गिव मनी टू इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर इन्वेस्टमेंट ट्रस्ट. Just like a mutual fund, it pools money from a lot of investors and gives it to infrastructure projects. Based on infrastructure returns, you get the returns. But returns are not exempted from tax. You have to know the basic instruments and these basic facts about it. They are not. They are recognized as borrowers under SARFAESI. SARFAESI is again an important development in Indian banking. So when we study the banking structure, 2002, there was an act passed that is SARFAESI. Under that, InvITs are recognized as borrowers. This is coming from the news. This is basic about InvITs. Which of the following are included in capital markets? What is capital market? More than 1 year. Call money is treasury bill. Government bond less than. So these two are not. Government bond market, dated securities, and 1 and 4, 2. Is it clear? Basics about capital market. This was a difficult question. In context of finance, the term beta refers to. है question terminology पे, but this in depth we don't go in the capital markets. This year they've asked, beta is numeric value that measures the fluctuations of stock to changes in overall stock market. Basic understanding newspaper. So this is what I said, you can't have sources for all. Whatever you learn, whatever you absorb, this is why we say absorb the newspaper, कि नहीं भी पता होगा तो बाकी 3 गलत समझ आ जाएंगे. This is what you can guess it, otherwise also, if you read, you will get some options wrong. Newspaper is the only source. This is why I keep on repeating, economics, newspaper से ही होगा. Either you get the right answer or you know what the other options, why they are wrong. Is it clear how financial markets have to be prepared? Financial markets, term, structure of the market, that's it. You don't have to go into too much detail. This is what most appropriate option out of the 4. If you know you have a background, definitely you get an edge there. Now next is agriculture performance. Agriculture, again, basics, right, start from 1947 till date. How has agriculture evolved in the country? One of the early reforms in agriculture was land reforms. Now basics about land reforms. What were the land reforms trying to do? Redistribution. Major aim of land reforms was providing agricultural land to the. Sealing laws were aimed at family holdings, resulted in cultivation of cash crops. Land reforms permitted no exemptions. That means all the 5 land reforms which happened, you need to know the details because they are asking specific features. Though this happened only once in 2019, but we don't know if it happens again or not. So agriculture, land reforms, and also land reforms is a topic mentioned in mains, which has to be covered in detail. The answer here was providing land to all landless. Sealing dono pe tha, individual family. Nothing like this happened. We did not move to food to cash and permitted exemptions. There were exemptions. The economic cost of food grains to FCI is minimum price paid to farmers plus. What does the FCI do? FCI has been in news in the last 2 months. Why? Why is FCI in news in the last 2 months? Central? Rice. There's an open market sales scheme under which they're not giving it to the states. So there you read about the FCI in detail. This is how questions can come. Now what is the cost of grains? FCI first, it procures it from the farmers and then distributes it to the states. So FCI ka cost will be MSP plus procurement and distribution. Every year economic survey talks about these factors in detail. कि कितना cost कहाँ बढ़ता जा रहा है. You're just being asked what exactly the economic cost is. Which of the following factors are affecting the price of rice in India in the recent past? The price of agriculture commodities, you've understood tomatoes? कैसे impact हो रहा है? Now rice, government of India has stopped the export of rice. You're seeing what is happening? Now what factors will affect the price of rice? Minimum support price? Government trading. Government trading means FCI selling or buying. Open market sales scheme is government trading. Government stockpiling. If government borrows too much stocks, will it affect the price? Go consumer subsidies. Less subsidies, more subsidies, price can change. How prices are impacted because of various policies in agriculture. Is it clear what type of questions? Same like banking, how also this works. Scheme. Under the Kisan Credit Card Scheme, short-term credit support is given to the farmers for what purposes? I said you have to understand the sector, you have to know its performance and the problems and solutions. One of the problems is credit to farmers. Credit to farmers का solution is Kisan Credit. Kisan Credit Card अब किस के लिए हो सकता है? This is an important thing. This is how you are getting questions. Working capital. Now, why the question was difficult? Construction of family house and consumption requirements. Will the money be available for family house? So if you eliminate 5, you can get the answer. It was given for consumption requirements, but not for family house. Broader, if you prepare the topic well, this is not a difficult question. MSP. In case of cereals, pulses and oil seeds, procurement is unlimited in any state. Do we take unlimited cereals, pulses? We take only rice and wheat, unlimited, rest limited. In case of cereal pulses, MSP is fixed at a level to which market price will never rise. What is MSP? Minimum. Is that price at which market price will never rise? No, your base hai. Market price should always be above. Is it clear? MSP, both will be wrong. Chemical fertilizers. At present, retail price of chemical fertilizers is market driven and not administered by the government. Subsidy hai, but price final कौन decide करता है? Market. There is one fertilizer for which price is fixed by government. Urea. Retail price of is market driven, not administered. Urea के लिए it is. Ammonia is an input of urea is produced from natural gas. This is one of the reforms in the fertilizer sector. The government moved the industries from naphtha to natural gas. So how fertilizer sector has performed agriculture, this is also a feature. Sulfur is a raw material for phosphoric acid, which is a byproduct of oil refineries. In basic class 6th, oil refineries, sulfur comes from oil, crude. Small farmer, large field, 2023. See, this is why you need more reading and you can solve these questions. And this is there in the news. Small farmer, large field. One of the problems in agriculture in India is that India has small and marginal farmers. 2015-16, the Agriculture Survey says more than 86% of the farmers have less than. This is a problem. How do you solve this problem? This is a problem in agriculture. Agriculture is a topic in mains. What is the solution for this? Collective. How do you make these collectives? You can form cooperatives. You can form FPOs. This strategy is called as small farmer, large field. This was done in Vietnam. Farmers were brought together and they started working. They were linked to certain companies which taught them further how to improve. Rice cultivation in Vietnam improved too much because of this large field concept. Odisha mein pilot project has been started. Otherwise also this has been mentioned in news because India ke paas problem hai. Now these type of questions you can't solve by just getting the term. You have to understand the sector. Sector mein problem kya hai, uska kya solution hai. Now see, small farmer, large field. Many marginal farmers organize themselves into groups and synchronize and harmonize selected agricultural operations. You have to ask yourself this question, ke how is the problem of small and marginal farmers getting solved? India has this big problem. You can have a question on this in mains. Even if you read the news, this is, you have to get curious ke kaise hoga solve. For example, farmer producer organization. Recently the government has also brought out a scheme where the government is promoting packs for agriculture marketing, interministerial committee to promote packs to do a range of functions. These are solutions to this. This is how. Why I'm discussing all these sectors, you are not getting sources. You have to see India's performance, problems and solutions. We saw it in banking. Why there were so many questions from 15 to 20 on banking? Because NPA related development happened every second day. After 2020, you will not find a lot of questions on banking. Capital markets पे shift हो गए because banking में इतने developments नहीं हुए हैं. Urban cooperative bank में हुआ, they asked the question in 21. So sector, you have to understand India's performance in all these sectors. Then only you can solve these type of questions. You can't look for the exact source. Definitely, this is why more reading gives you this. अब beta का term है, live mentor ने explain किया है beta कितनी बार. Yes, this is why I said 2 newspapers. If you're not reading something else from the other newspaper, just read the economic part. You will have to improvise. You understand from the examiner point of view, the paper is only going to get tough. You are not going to get, because they've exhausted easy questions and only they can repeat those easy questions. This is why all of the other subjects, see history, see any of the subjects, environment, geography, the difficulty level is changing because the questions have been exhausted, and if you prepare from the previous strategy, you are going to get disappointed. This is why this session, that you have to change your strategy. You will have to read more. If you don't read more, then you will say luck based exam. Ke UPSC kya kar raha hai? Definitely it becomes luck based if you are not well read. People are not even reading one newspaper. I am recommending 2. That means you are far. You have to change. Otherwise stop preparing. You have to change. You can't convince yourself that yes, I am practicing every day behind like Virat Kohli, I will play IPL. You have to face the reality कि 150 की बॉल आती है. ये ऐसे नहीं फेंकता वहाँ बॉल कोई. So you will have to face whatever exists. You can't hide from the reality. Definitely 1 or 2 questions would be missed out, but majority you will solve. See, like think beta कैसे solve हुआ? अगर सही आंसर नहीं पता था तो गलत eliminate हो गए. More and more reading, but on the same topic, but on the same problem. This is not nothing new. You will have to. Otherwise, only gully cricket. मैं बैट लेके घर चला जाऊंगा आउट हुआ तो. Government of India provides MSP for Niger seeds. Niger is cultivated as a kharif crop. Some tribal people use. Now this is how MSP question has evolved. 2018 the question was 6 crops and they asked out of which MSP is decided. Now they've picked 1 crop out of the 22 and 3 statements. You have to evolve. There is no other way. Provides, and one thing more benefit is that cutoff is going to go less. And you marks don't add. You just have to qualify. So you have to get the answer right no matter how. MSP, yes, for Niger there, cultivated as a kharif and also used by tribals. This is how the evolution has happened. Only 3. This is what I'm saying. Crop ka pata hona, 22 crops ka ek general idea. For example, you know anything about the sunflower seed? How or why? Not crops. Sunflower seed had a very big controversy where the Haryana government was not taking it at MSP. So this is how you prepare those crops which are often mentioned. These type of third statements would be difficult. This would be difficult. Down to earth and all, you know, reading sources. What I'm saying, out of the 16, this question if you skip, or even beta you skip, these are the 2 questions which are obscure, rest you need to know. This is difficult to prepare Niger seed ka, tribal ka relation. Industry, the last segment. Atal Innovation Mission is set up under. Niti Aayog has 2 verticals, one for center-state relations and the other for research and development, which is Atal Innovation Mission. So one of the developments with respect to Niti Aayog. Industry, coal sector. Coal sector was nationalized by the government of India under Indira Gandhi. When was coal nationalized? Coal India Limited. Any idea when was coal nationalized? When were bank nationalized? 69. Before 69, any nationalization happened? When was State Bank of India formed? SBI. 55. Imperial Bank, State Bank. Coal sector. 63, then it's not Indira Gandhi. It was 73. Economic performance throughout the years. Coal blocks are allocated on lottery basis. How are coal blocks allocated in India? See, this was asked because 2018, we changed the policy for coal blocks. 2018, before 2018, India allowed only coal through PSU, that is state. Nationalized sector tha, sirf state tha. After 2018, the government has also allowed private. Not allocated, but auctions. In fact, coal scam bhi the auctions hone chahiye. India imported coal to meet the shortages of domestic supply, but now India is self-sufficient in coal production. Is India self-sufficient in coal production? Elimination se bhi this question would have ended. Answer would be. But why this question has been asked? Because there was a development where India started privatizing coal. After 2018, this is a question in 2019. A development in the sector, this question. A lot of industrial developments have been asked because of recent current affairs. As per the Industrial Employment Central Rules 2018, can anyone tell why this question? Why specific notification? What happened was, India has mostly people who are on permanent payroll or who are contractual. India mostly has people who are on contract employment. Now, contract employment faces a problem that they do not get good wages, that they give poor working conditions, and also no social security. Now, to solve this problem of contract workers, the government introduced a concept of fixed term employment. What happens in a fixed term employment? Fixed term employment is a contractual labor, but till the time of contract is going to have permanent features. It's a mixture of both, where you are going to be on contract, but for the time of contract, all of your features are going to be same as permanent. The government of India started this with 3 sectors, footwear, apparel, leather, and then shifted to all through this order. तो ये problem एक solve कर रहा था Indian economy में, that was a problem of exploitation of informal. Again, sector questions are based on what problems exist and what solutions exist. This was a solution. You don't have to go to the industrial order, you just need to know whether this has been happening or not. Features, it becomes easier for the companies to lay off workers. Now if fixed term employment is introduced, will it become easy for the company to lay off? Why? ले ऑफ तो ऑब्वियस आना है क्योंकि है तो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट पे ही. कॉन्ट्रैक्ट के टाइम पे आपको सब देना है बट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट पे ही है. सो कैन आई ले ऑफ इजीली? यस, दिस इज डेफिनेटली गेट द बेनिफिट बिकॉज आई ओनली हैव टू गिव देम फीचर्स. है तो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट पे ही, 2 साल पे तो है और वट एवर टाइम. नो नोटिस ऑफ टर्मिनेशन ऑफ एम्प्लॉयमेंट शैल बी नेसेसरी. Since it's a temporary workman, no notice of termination. This was solving the problem of informal. This is a very important development, fixed term employment. Consider the following statements. PNGRB is the first regulatory body set up by government. Again, structure of industry. One of the most important sector is your power sector. Power mein it is gas. The natural gas sector is seeing a lot of development in terms of transmission of gas, how to solve that problem, and also in terms of infrastructure creation, more of gas pipelines. और सिर्फ power के लिए नहीं है, gas is also being promoted under the city distribution. Under the city distribution plant, gas is being there for CNG and also PNG. CNG is for vehicles, PNG is for domestic households. So this all function is being done under the regulator of this sector, that is, one of the tasks of PNG is to ensure competitive markets for gas. It's not the first regulator, there were other regulatory bodies created. This body is created in 2006. Basic about the gas sector. Appeals against decision go before appellate tribunal for electricity. Structure ऐसा है, appellate tribunal for electricity sees the appeals from Central Electricity Regulatory Commission and state. But since PNGRB did not have any body to listen to the complaints, they gave the function to the same body. And UPSC asked a statement, appeals against decisions of PNGRB go to appellate tribunals for electricity. 2006 में this body was created, this body was created in 2003. इसके appeals यहाँ जाते हैं. Normally this was created for this sector. This is how you need to know the structure of the sector. With reference to casual workers employed in India, again a feature of Indian economy, casual workers. All casual workers are entitled to EPF. Yes or no? Less than 15,000 are compulsory, beyond that, not compulsory. Casual workers are entitled for regular working hours and overtime payment. Yes, this is true. Government can by notification specify establishment shall pay wages through bank account. Government by notification can do this. Basic problem which is being solved here is problem of casualization. So problem ka solution government kya kar raha hai? This is your statements. EPFO otherwise also in news. 3 days back, Hindu covered a very big article on informalization and EPFO. How EPFO is used as a measure to measure permanent employee because everyone has to have a PF account. This was covered extensively. With reference to foreign owned e-commerce, FDI in e-commerce, another important sector. They can sell their goods in addition to offering their platform as marketplace. Can FDI in e-commerce sell own goods? India has two. This is again news, very important, covered in news also. E-commerce in FDI, India allows only one model, that is inventory model. Sorry, marketplace. Inventory is not allowed. Marketplace means you can allow your services only as a marketplace where sellers and buyers can meet. If you control inventory, you can't sell anything. Ye model allowed nahi hai, you can't do that. Only provide marketplace where these two meet. You cannot be the seller. They can sell their own goods, this is not allowed. And not just sell their own goods, they also cannot own big sellers. No amount you cannot own any seller, this player cannot have equity in this. This is also not allowed. 2019, this was made a clarification. The question came in 2022 because this is a recurring theme on e-governance or governance in e-commerce. Because Amazon is a very substantial player. This is foreign-owned e-commerce firms. Sectoral developments with respect to this in industry, this is how questions. In India, which of the following compiles information on industrial disputes? Closures, retrenchments and layoffs in factories employing workers. Basic information about industry, it's the Labor Bureau. Basics about Indian industry structure and then the performance. Consider the following pairs. Port, transportation services. This is quite often in news. Mundra Port, it is the largest private. The Ennore Port or the Kamrajar Port, why is this famous? Most of the, do you know how PSUs are organized? What are the different types of PSUs? How industry is organized in India? PSU could be as part of the government department. It could be a statutory corporation, that is through act of a parliament, or it could through a company. This port is the only one which is registered as a company. In fact, why this is asked, because in the last 2 to 3 years, the government is talking about corporatization of ports, making them a full-fledged government company. Because having control of government through trust or through an act gives more control to the government. We want them to be registered as a, this is a reform which has been talked about in the last 3 years, that is corporatization of ports, meaning converting them into a company, and this is one port which is a company, major port out of the 13, this is the one. Visakhapatnam port, largest container port. Largest container port is JNPT. How will you know this? Newspaper. Mundra port, you know why it was in news? Why? Drugs. A lot of drugs, not just small, lot of drugs. So you get a reference. How? Port governance. This all information is also there in the survey. Power, another important sector. India, despite having uranium deposits, depends on coal for most of its electricity production. From where does electricity come in India mostly? 60%. How much is uranium or nuclear? It's uranium only, thorium to abhi we don't have any technology. Only 2%. Uranium enriched to the extent of 60% is required for production of electricity. Bomb. Iran, a lot of things in news with respect to uranium enrichment. See, these things you can't have a source. Most of these sectoral, this is based on your awareness of the sector. Definition of MSME. According to MSME, medium enterprises are those investment in plant machinery between 15 and 20. How do we classify MSME? What are the various factors on which MSME is classified? Turnover and investment. 2018, the definition was only investment, now it's turnover and investment. Another statement is related to banking. All bank loans to MSME are under priority sector. For this, you need to know what priority sector is. There are 8 segments under priority sector. One is loans given to MSME. For this, banking may, after lead bank, we introduce the concept of priority sector. So there, where they are relating banking to MSME. One is definition of MSME. Is it clear? This is wrong. 50 crores hai. Yes. You will understand priority sector. Priority sector may are loans advanced to agriculture, loans advanced to MSME, weaker sections. There are certain sectors. This will be counted as priority. Yes, this is what the RBI regulation says. Then there's one question on microeconomics in the last 5 years. Microeconomics, for example, demand of a particular good. Microeconomics, the individual behavior or producer behavior of individual producer. These things once in 3-4 years. Last question that asked in, I think 2017, based on opportunity cost. So this topic, you just have to cover the basics. What is demand, what is supply, elasticity, very basic concepts. One question might turn out. This is one example. Other things remaining unchanged, market demand for a good will increase. When its price of substitute increases. If the price of substitute increases, will I demand more of that product? No or yes? Substitute is increasing price. Will I demand more of the? Definitely, substitute price increases, I will demand more. If the price for complement increases, complement hai, so definitely I can't. Complement ka price increase, I will reduce the demand. Good is an inferior good and income of consumer rises. This is called as the Angel's law. He said that if people's income rises, they don't spend more on inferior, they buy luxury goods more. So demand will not increase. Price falls. Will the demand increase if price falls? Definitely, this is the law of demand. You demand more if price falls. Answer would be 1 and 4. Is it clear how economics has to be prepared? Any doubts? I'll give you my email address in case you have doubts. I can see the faces. And I also have a message to read. He is ज़्यादा curious हो रहा है मेरे लिए. क्या लिखा है? Which could not wait 10 minutes more. धमकी मिली हो. बाहर निकलो बुलडोजर में बैठो. This is my email address in case you have any doubts with respect to economics, what is to be prepared and how it is to be prepared. Yes, you had a doubt. Basics. Mains is very clear. Mains has given you the topics. Those topics can have a static or a current question. You need to know everything about that topic. It's clear. Have 4 to 5 pages, 6 to 7 pages, which are going to help you write an answer 150, 250. Prelims ka these dimensions which I talked in front, and then the type of questions. This is going to drive your preparation. This forms the base, mains builds on it. Macroeconomic part वहाँ कम आता है. Indian sectors की performance ये सारी जो second part of the discussion था. See the syllabus, you'll get an idea. Here there's no syllabus, this is why the problem. This is why the problem, what to read, how much to read. In detail, because now you don't have the option of elimination. You have to know the facts. You can't do with like one eliminated two. So the paper is getting on the tougher side, you will have to read it thoroughly. You can't just skip it. Otherwise people used to do with compilations, and compilations used to help a lot. But that cannot happen anymore. There is no answer now. There has to be newspaper. You have to evolve like the exam is doing. Same with CSAT. Every part. Mains is very sure. Mains is something they know. That we are going to give you space. Whatever you know will come out. Less time, under pressure, whatever you know will come out. So we'll judge you. This is why mains is what selects. This is just screening. Because screening, we don't want to check everyone's paper. And cutoff is not counted, like whatever you score. There the performance based on topics, that's very predictable. It's hard to perform. Here its predictability is less, but the paper is easy. Why? The answer is in front. But you will have to change. Newspaper is the major source along with survey. Once you know the basics, this is what. You can't read books. This is what economics page of what newspaper? Hindu covers very less on economics. Hindu is good on opinion and other parts. Hindu covers very less on economics. This is why I say just read the economics part from Indian Express. See, somewhere someone will be reading those two. And this is a competition. And anyone who is reading two. Now you can't expect that I read the least and I get the maximum rank. This is not going to happen. This is a competition. Had it been an absolute exam, definitely you would do anything. University mein 60 and 65, who cares? Until unless you want to be the topper. But here it's a competition. Someone else is doing it and he's going to beat you there. So you will have to have a good idea, well read. Well read is when you have. Newspaper every day, if you read for 1 year, you'll retain most of the things. Newspaper, nothing new is happening. Same things are happening again, different perspectives are being mentioned. So this is why habit of reading 2, 3 definitely gives you an edge. This is why Hindu and Express both. Read it selectively. The second newspaper should be selective. Skip a lot of parts. So this is where I said 1 or 2 questions. For example, water, credit, beta. These are 1 or 2 questions where the UPSC is giving, see, you can't attempt 100. You have to go 80, 85. So 15 questions to chhodne. That beta or that water credit is something you have to skip because this is something you can't prepare for. You have to give it to the examiner. No, I can't solve this question. Focus on those parts where you can. And most of the questions which I've shown you you can solve. The first part mostly macroeconomics. Even Indian economy, agriculture, MSP and related things, this is something you should solve. The problem is not getting the difficult questions right. The problem is getting these easy questions right. If you anyhow score 50 out of this, 50 means 100. You're done. Focus on the doable parts. This is why revise, practice, revise, practice. But what to be revised, you have to change. Mains will take different because mains is requiring analysis. You will have to learn to write. But if you don't understand the basics, how will you learn to write? If you don't understand microeconomics, you don't understand fiscal deficit, how will you write about the government or growth? For example, first part I discussed poverty and unemployment in India. If you don't know how Indian sectors are organized, where people are, what strategies are, how are you going to write? So if you don't know the base, you will not be able to write. And yes, you will have to read. Kam padhne se nahi hota selection. That used to happen in college. It won't happen anymore because people are. And the problem is, in this you can't see what others are doing. This is why we get complacent, we stop reading the newspaper, we are satisfied on our sense ke magazine se ho raha hai. वो दिखेगा उस दिन ही सीधा कि क्या हो रहा है. And then people start complaining, they start tearing books, इससे कुछ नहीं. Your expectation was wrong. And nothing is going to change. Keep on crying. Cry for 6 years. Because we have given 6 years, 6 attempts. Nothing is going to change. But if you read well enough, definitely you have a good chance of clearing it. Thank you. Basic minimum source, the printed material you have from the institute. That's the most basic thing. That builds a very good understanding plus what is happening in the class. That helps you understand newspaper. How can someone know what is beta or how can someone know कि uranium से energy होती है या coal से ज़्यादा है? किसी को पता, किसी को idea नहीं है. कैसे पता चल रहा है ये? Because someone is there on Instagram, other person is reading the newspaper. तो Instagram को ये पता होगा कि सीमा हैदर कौन है. Newspaper वाले को ये पता होगा uranium 60%, 80% है. It completely depends on what exposure you are getting, what type of things you are reading, and for this 1 year you have to get exposure to all this. You have to, when you discuss the newspaper, you have to talk about with someone that how informalization of labor force can be solved. Gig economy is everywhere around you. You see people delivering food on Zomato, they're delivering food on what? Cycles. And yesterday the owner was distributing friendship bands. Hey, paise de dena unko. What is friendship band? Think about these problems. Then only you will know casual workers ko EPFO deta ke nahi deta kuch. Casual workers, what is fixed term employment? Because if you're not thinking about those problems, you can't do this answer. This is a very evolved exam. It doesn't rely on bookish or rote learning. It doesn't rely on any source. It relies where at present you stand, what level of awareness you have. The level of awareness comes from reading. Reading the most basic newspaper. We don't read too much. I've never recommended any book. The first part is conceptual, comes from sources, the basic sources. You need practice there. Rest is newspapers. Read 2, you are going to get most of the answers here. Niger seed is a question which you have to solve. Because MSP was already asked in 2018. You can't say Niger seed is difficult. How do I prepare for this? 2018, they have given you a question, MSP is done for what crops? In mains, they were given a question, what is MSP? How does MSP help? They've given a question, MSP is public investment or not? How else is you're going to get a question on MSP? What's the next level? Or what's the next question? This is the next question. Don't expect easy things. They broke this easy thing right in 2017 when they shifted away from Lakshmikant. They thought that 2014 to 17, polity bahut easy ho raha hai, everybody is buying Lakshmikant and solving questions. And see from 17 to 2023, see the level of evolution happened in polity questions. Is that book what you're reading, is it relevant? Now see the relevance on your own. Hardly 2 to 3 questions. This is happening in every subject. You can't be stuck in the previous world when the questions are coming, are different, themes are same, topics are same. You have to evolve. You still can't read the same source and expect. At the end of the day, you'll only complain UPSC is doing this. And the ones who are appearing, but UPSC has never asked you, aao bhai bano. You are taking the choice. You are taking the decision. So you will have to prepare what they're doing. Beggars can't be choosers. And we all are begging for the job. You can't choose. कि मैं सिर्फ 400 पेज सर्वे के नहीं, मैं 4 पेज पढ़ के आऊँगा. सीधा प्राइम मिनिस्टर बनो. NCERT only class 12th macroeconomics NCERT. That's the only NCERT that has some relevance in this exam for economics. Rest you can skip. How is? What is that? 12th class only macroeconomics NCERT on the NCERT website. You can also get in print. Macroeconomics part which I discussed, the first part of the discussion, is completely from that book. And every year there are 4 to 5 questions from that book. And I hope you know what type of questions now. In case you have any doubt, you can definitely write to me. Thank you. It's not threatening. It's safe. Yes.